just like if you say you had a problem too, so it doesn't look like it's visible. Yeah, they're doing I'll remember that at your Christmas card, your Christmas present. Someone got your line up. Right. I said, tell my son, close your eyes, you're gonna see it. Sing it every day. Where? I believe so. I'm sorry, but we love that. I know, but we love that. I'm going to put it on. In the lobby. Oh. I think like the look of the bench. I like it better if you do it. It is easier for me to maintain because they also breathing my own air. I have a lot of hot air. What are you laughing at? Are you agreeing with that? Right.
Wireless 4.
It's all unmuted.
For those of you on Zoom who do not see a microphone, you may want to log off and log back in to get your microphone to work. Test one.
Yeah, and I've got a meeting starting in like 10 minutes. Are you okay? That's okay.
At 5:30 p.m. Mr. Dias, would you please read our statement?
Yes, sir. This is the regular commission meeting of May 26th pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020. Municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Florida Statute 120.54. Procedures for public comment by device. If you wish to speak during public comment, click Participants, then click Raise Hand at bottom of window. Your microphone will be unmuted when you are called to speak, and you will be invited to activate your camera if you wish. Both will be deactivated once your comment time is completed. If you're attending by telephone, press *9 to raise your hand. You will be called by your partially displayed phone number, so please listen for that number. The host will lower your hand and mute your phone line after you're completed speaking. Please state your name and address clearly prior to commenting during public comment. During roll call, the commission is asked to advise if they are here in person or remotely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dias. Ms. Kindle, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Meyer,
Here in person.
Vice Mayor Clark,
Here in person.
Commissioner Bruner,
Here in person.
Commissioner Glass-Leighton,
Here in person.
Commissioner Matheson.
Here in person. Thank you, Ms. Kindle. Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have some service awards today. And unfortunately, I believe that none of our awardees are here to receive in person. However, I'd like to honor Mr. David Jackson with Fire Rescue for 20 years of service. Ms. Kathleen Lannon with the Stewart PD for 20 years of service. Mr. Matthew Cernuto with PD, 15 years of service. And last but not least, Ms. Lisa Conti with Public Works for 5 years. Thank you. And then for our Employee of the Month, we have Mr. Peters presenting.
It's coming down, sir.
Evening, Mayor and Commissioners.
Good evening, Mr. Peters.
Once again, it's my pleasure to announce that one of our team members has been selected as the Employee of the Month for May of 2020. As many of you may be aware, that our vehicle maintenance team leader has been out on family medical leave since November of 2019. During this time, Kenny Miller has stepped up as a diesel gas mechanic and acted in a higher capacity while maintaining his current duties. Kenny's work ethic and his technical skills have ensured that the vehicle and equipment maintenance schedules, as well as the routine repairs, have been met and the needs of all the city departments. Wow. In addition, he's been tasked with inventory control, a major software upgrade, and budgetary controls. Kenny's quiet demeanor, confidence has put stability back in the vehicle maintenance department while Bob has been out. Always willing to accept new challenges. Kenny has demonstrated and exemplifies the city's values by treating others with dignity and respect. For the reasons mentioned above, and in this weird way, I would ask that you would recognize him over Zoom as being the city's Employee of the Month 2000 for May of 2020.
Yay, Kenny.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller like to give a speech via Zoom?
I am looking for him. I don't see him on here.
Hopefully he's celebrating with a socially distanced drink somewhere. Well, congratulations, Mr. Miller, and thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do. You are much appreciated. We also have a LOSUM update by Mr. Ben Hogarth.
Good evening, commissioners. I hope everyone can hear me through the mask.
Yes, sir.
Well, the good news is we are almost exactly where we were last year, this time with lake elevation, currently sitting at 11.24 feet. Last year was about 11 feet on the dot. So we're very, very close to our goal of hitting around 11 feet by June 1st. So we're happy about that. The Army Corps has managed the lake in a very similar way as last year. So this is 2 years in a row without destructive discharges. We're seeing one of the videos we recently cited on our social media was a post by, I believe it was Bull Sugar Alliance that posted it, but it was a video of grasses growing in the St. Lucie River. So that was a wonderful thing to see. That's something we haven't seen in quite a while because of all the damages in previous years. There's obviously no discharges coming our way. We've also fought with the West Coast to try and get them their discharges that they need over there, backing them up because we think that working together to make sure that they get the discharges that they need, the actual fresh water they need, is going to help their estuary, and it will certainly help ours by not getting any. So right now, the water conservation areas also sit right around schedule or just below schedule. So there may have been some misnomers on social media that the south, there's this drought condition, it's really dry. Yes, we've had limited precipitation this year as a result of reduced storms and rainwater and all that. Obviously, this weekend is a little bit of an exception to that. But the good news is that we're here not really in a super drought condition. The water conservation areas are right at schedule. So there's a lot of misrepresentations that are kind of being made. And the reason I'm stating that is because one of the things we've done recently is to talk about the savings clause with LOSUM. The savings clause is a very complicated topic. It goes all the way back to 1999 to 2000, the first water bill that came out. And in short, the way that it is interpreted will define how our lake is managed in the future. And the way that we've interpreted it for the last 20 years has been accurate, has been true to the original congressional intent. Unfortunately, there are actors out there that are now trying to change that in Congress. So recently, we drafted a support letter to go along with the joint correspondence with Martin County. That support letter was transmitted to the Army Corps, basically stating kind of what our position was. It was also provided to Congress, to our representatives in Congress. So those are good actions that we've done kind of on the sideline of the main LOSUM process that we've been going through for the last year and a half. So there's a lot of actions being taken in addition to the normal LOSUM process just because of some of the politics that's out there. And all of it is just designed to kind of defend what we've done the past couple of years so that we don't lose progress. And we've made incredible progress because of the community, obviously, as loud as they've been, and then certainly by the actions of the commission over the last couple of years, getting the city to be more involved in these processes with Martin County and certainly the West Coast. And then also most recently by actions by yourself with that letter. And then in addition, some of the other things we've transmitted to the Army Corps. So we're doing a lot right now behind the scenes, and also some of which comes in front of you all. One of the things that I'm going to be bringing forward in the near future, probably at the next meeting, is going to be another letter, a little bit longer, but it's going to be to the South Florida Water Management District. And I just wanted to make all of you aware that we were doing that in addition to the most recent letter that we drafted and adopted. And it's the same subject, it's the savings clause. But the reason why it's important that we do that is because at the most recent governing board meeting on May 14th, there were probably close to a dozen or more public commenters that claimed that South Florida is being destroyed because of the lake elevation, that the drought conditions are a direct result of lower lake levels, which all of that is inaccurate. And so we've tried to write a letter and draft a letter that kind of explains why that's inaccurate. I'm not going to go into it tonight, but I wanted to make sure that you all knew that that was on the docket. It's coming up, and it's definitely important to kind of set the boundaries, especially with the district, to let them know, hey, this is incorrect legally and this is why. We know that the board there pretty much already agrees with that. We just want to give them a little bit more ammunition, a little bit more information that they might not have had in the past. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but that's going to be coming up in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. Hogarth.
Thank you.
I think we should all call Jackie Thurlow Lippish and tell her that we agree. So,
Absolutely. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our comments by city commissioners. Commissioner Glass Layton.
Wow, kind of surreal, huh?
Yeah.
Whew. I feel just about as anxious now as I did 8 years ago. You know, I've been reminded, and I apologize for getting emotional. I'm just an emotional person. I've been reminded throughout this journey of something that's often been said, but not always fully appreciated. And I know up here, us up here certainly can. All of us sitting up here, we are truly only as good as all the staff that has supported us. Our staff gives up so much of their time. They give up late nights, they give up their weekends, they postpone their vacations. They sometimes don't even get home at night to tuck their kids in for bed. And they do all of us, and they share all these moments with us because they're helping us better serve the public. Now, they're not elected. Their names rarely make the paper, and they certainly did not get into public to get rich. We all know that. But they do it anyway. And that's all of our staff, from the frontline workers in our public works department, all the way up to our city manager and city attorney and everyone in between. These are really the dedicated, hardworking, professional men and women that truly make our job so much easier and truly make the city what it is today. So I wanted to thank every single one of the staff, present and former. You have made my job a lot easier, and you are certainly just a pleasure to work with. It's been a true honor to serve the Stuart residents and business owners. I want to thank my fellow commissioners, present and past. And more importantly, I want to thank the residents for their continuous vote of confidence. You know, I truly believe when people vote for you, it's not only that you're sending you to City Hall to sit up here, but they're also giving you a vote of confidence that you'll be their voice, that you'll be their vote, and that you'll be at their side and on their side. I'm so incredibly grateful for all the residents for trusting me during these last 8.5 years and for giving me that opportunity. It has been a true privilege to serve you, and I hope that I've made you proud. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor?
Of course, yesterday was Memorial Day. And
Microphones, please.
microphone is not here. Can you hear me, Mary? Yes, Eula Clark, Vice Mayor. Yesterday was Memorial Day, and of course, we know it was raining, and we had already not set out anything, but I did post on my personal Facebook page about the new park name that we had given about 4 years or so ago for Smith Turner Park. And I had comments, or even people just calling me, even if they didn't comment directly. And so I just think that it made a little impact, and it was a little memory. Of course, we have our beautiful Memorial Park, which probably was all flooded and everything, but I think that it is so important that we had thought about doing something special in our town to honor our veterans and to honor those who have fallen along the way. And that was just special for me to know that our city has set aside something very special. And we have two parks in memory of, for a lot of different reasons, but especially when we've set this up. So I just think it was a good thing. For the city manager, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him before, but I did see a message from Ms. Faye James about the allocation of fiber optics and high-speed cable internet. And I know that Comcast and others have said everybody should have the access to the Wi-Fi, and there's an Internet Essentials program for persons who may not even have been on cable, but now their children would need to have access to Wi-Fi or to possibly hook into the Internet Essentials program. But there was some apparent question that she was saying whether or not there was some particular areas of town where AT&T was saying that either they did not put service or did not have service, or maybe there was not the availability based on how fiber optics were placed. And I just wanted to know if you have an answer, and I know that I saw your answer, but I just wanted to bring this up.
Sure, yes, there was some misunderstanding of an item that had come before the Community Redevelopment Board as it relates to undergrounding utility lines. And so when they were talking about undergrounding lines, she believed they were talking about communication lines, utility lines, and that was the item she was referring to about where they were going to be undergrounded at. We have not had a fiber optic line proposal come before the commission to run fiber optic into there. And so I went on AT&T's site, did some analyzing of where that may be available. And there is some fiber optic high-speed internet north of the bridge, but south of the bridge, it varies all over the place in the city from 5 megabaud to 100. So it depends on where you happen to be at, what street you happen to be at, but I didn't see any of the high-speed fiber optic available. Now, and that's with AT&T. And then I have reached out to our government representative to look into that, which he is doing for me. And because she is correct in that if you do go onto their finder on their website, it shows there's no internet access in that 5-block community, which I know is not accurate because she has it. So they're checking into that and what their website shows. However, there is, as you had mentioned, Comcast in that neighborhood. Their Wi-Fi's are opened up because of this situation with kids, and you can actually, and I suggested this to her because there are a lot of Xfinity Wi-Fi's in that neighborhood, and if they're currently wide open so that kids can have access to it, that she could probably utilize that access without a login. We're still emailing back and forth on the responses, and I'm still waiting for our AT&T representative response.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mayor, may I continue?
Yes, Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to say, Kelly and I have had a history together. We practically almost started together. We ran in the same race with what, 3 other people, 2 other? Yeah, several. And so she did come on after I did, but we did start out, I think we probably, after a long history in the city of Stewart, we were the only 2 that had a runoff election at one point. And so I just want to tell you, thank you for your service, and thank you for what you've done during your 8.5 years in the city of Stewart. And every time we do or say something or make an impact, we know that it does make a difference. And I just want to thank you. And as you go on for higher elected office as you're running, I just want to thank you and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Matheson?
Yes. I want to thank Mr. Hogarth for his presentation update. And thank all the commissioners for supporting me in what I brought up last meeting regarding the water savings clause. I know we all don't like kind of late notice items like that. And I thank you for the support you gave me, in this entire river battle. And in that letter, I felt it was urgent that our support letter with the county's position be sent with the county's letter, which it was. So I thank you all for that. And I'm really thrilled at the direction this has all come. I'm very happy that we have Mr. Hogarth to dedicate almost his full time, and working on this stuff for the city of Stuart. And as fortuitous as it is that the lake is where it is, I can't imagine how I would be sleeping if we got all the rain we have in the past few days, if the lake was at 13.5 feet or so, where it has been the past 35 years on average at this time. So who knows what the summer will bring, but we're in a great position. And I wanted to say that since it is Memorial Day, odds are in a few years or even right now, we should be, and I feel like at times this country isn't enough, we should be memorializing those we've already lost to COVID. And I can guarantee we will in some sort of more formal fashion in the future. And we all need to be united as a country in dealing with this, or united as a world in dealing with this. And sometimes we're not. I wish we were. But we can't let this divide the world or divide us as a country over a little microscopic virus. We all have to be positive, and we will win and prevail, and our economy will win and prevail. Finally, I'd like to say it's been an honor, former Mayor Glass-Leighton, sitting up here serving with you. And it's very enjoyable knowing you're going to pursue public service even more after this. And I've learned a lot serving with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Matheson.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bruner.
Yes. I don't know what I'd do if it wasn't for Kelly sitting to the right of me when I felt so nervous being thrown into the being the mayor. But you got me through some tough times and would tell me what to say and what to do and what was coming up. It kept me confused because I got nervous, and if I wouldn't have gotten so nervous, I think I would have got through it more. I wish you the very best, the very, very best. And also I want to say, when the last time we were here, talking about the children opening up on 10th Street, and I just want to say, I went by there when they opened up Monday and brought the kids in, and I just want to thank what Kelly was saying about our staff. Julian and Jennifer and all those ladies over there were there for those children. It's so important. And I think Julie needed that week. But anyway, it's a real honor to sit here and the things that we see and where we're capable of helping you with the river mayor. Mr. Matheson. There's just so many that when we come here, we just have different things that we do, and we're all different, and it's worked out really great so far. So I'm really gonna miss you because we've been such a great little team here, and we can't always be. We can do this sometimes, but that's okay. We're here, we can do it and get through it. There's been so much respect here. So Kelly, I want to thank you for helping me so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We just finalized 2 weeks of testing that was hosted and organized by the Martin County Department of Health. I went and got tested. I understand a couple of my colleagues here on the board did. Boy, that nasal swab was invasive. But I was proud to have done it, and I'd do it again, and I will. I sure darn hope to continue doing it. And it got me thinking, I'd like to have Renee Rouse, if we could potentially give us, even if it's on Zoom, just a brief update at meetings, or if not, coordinate with staff and we could have a brief presentation each meeting just to give us an update on where we stand with new cases. I know we have lost that, well, it was daily and then it turned to Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Monday, Friday, and now no longer the EOC call for elected officials. And I think it's important for us to be able to keep an eye on the data. You know, we're reopening, people are getting out there, and it's good for our small businesses, but we need to make sure that we keep an eye on the data. So if we could have that update, that would be great. Commissioner, former mayor, Kelly, you, I've really enjoyed and appreciated sitting up here with you. I think some people like to paint us as being at odds for some reason. I have such respect for you, for your thought process, for your thoroughness, for your integrity. It's been an honor sitting next to you, and you have been a real inspiration to me as another young leader. You've been a trailblazer, and I'm happy to follow in your footsteps, and I've learned a lot from you. And again, we don't always agree, but I have been very, I guess I haven't been too surprised, but it's been nice that we have agreed as much as we have. And I love that we can find commonality even with such different approaches. So I wish you all the best, and I'm really sorry to see you go, but I know it's for the best. I know it's for the best for you and for your family and for our county. So thank you very much, and you'll be sorely missed. And on behalf of staff and all of us, we do have a little parting gift for you.
Oh my God.
And I'd love to be able to hug you.
Can we get a photo op? Have the two of you come down here.
Let's get a photo op, and I think we could get close because we've got our face coverings on. Let's take a risk.
Thank you guys so much.
Are we all going up here?
Yep.
The commissioners are all getting infected.
Come on, Vice Mayor.
They won't be in the picture anyway.
For 5 seconds.
Right.
Too close.
Headlines tomorrow. City Commission ignores rules.
Thank you.
Good thing you guys didn't make that resolution mandatory.
Why? They're wearing the mask.
It's all about taking calculated risks. And I will say, as a matter of course, just to respect Kelly's service, Commissioner, former Mayor Glass-Layton, that she served the city of Stewart for over 8 years, more than 8 years, nearly 9, and served as our mayor in 2015 and 2018. So thanks again. All right, enough crying.
Yes.
Mr. Dias, do you have any comments?
Just a couple. And to follow that up, Commissioner Layton, your plaque at the Mayor's Park is being updated also, so I'll have your full service on there as well.
Thank you.
As you may have seen, the manager protections order, the athletic fields are opening starting tomorrow, but the individual users groups have to present a plan. Thus far, we've received 2 plans that have been acceptable to the city. One was for Martin North Little League, and the other was for North Stars. Both those are baseball organizations. We have also opening reinstating the 3-hour parking districts, and warnings start this week with fines starting on next Monday. That's all I have, sir.
Mr. Dias, if I may, do we have any plan for enforcement of those? I know we're asking for a plan. Are we going to be doing at least just a little check or monitor of how those plans are being followed?
Yes, and so it is revocable. So
Okay.
if we see that there's an issue or whatever, we can revoke the ability. to not
Thank you,
follow
sir.
the plan.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Vice Mayor.
I see that we have former Mayor Troy McDonald with us today.
Yes. Okay.
I'll move approval of the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
I have an approval of the agenda moved by Commissioner Glass-Layton and the second by Vice Mayor Clark. Any comment on the agenda? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Agenda is passed unanimously. Moving on to comments from the public. Now, for those of you who have joined us in previous weeks during Zoom, but not this last meeting we have since we were originally doing all of our public comment for all agenda items and general at the front of the meeting. And now that we've gotten a little more experienced with Zoom, we are going back to the original way. General public comment now, and then any agenda item, we will take public comment before a vote, if any is to be taken. So I have one green card for an item. Do I have any public comment here in the room for general, not agenda? Seeing none. Mr. Dias, do we have any online?
Yes, I do, sir.
Oh, sorry, I'm too quick on the draw. Thanks, Ms. Kindle.
If you're attending by Zoom and wish to give public comment on general items, please raise your hand now.
Thank you. I have Mr. Stephen Layton.
Yeah.
I wonder what he was going to talk about.
He's on the landing.
Hello, Mayor, Commissioners, staff.
Oh,
I
sir.
come tonight to talk to you about the Congressional Art Competition as stated there on the public records. Because of the social distancing and everything that we're trying to work with, and we usually use the Art Council, we had reached out to the Flagler Center in hopes that we could facilitate some type of a partnership with them. And I was told that we needed to rent that out. So I come before you all to find out if in that lease, like we've worked in the past, as you know, is there something that we could work on one of those days that you guys have? Because Mr. Campenny said that there would be a fee. So I'm trying to minimize our costs on the federal side and work in cooperation and partnership with you all as we have done in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. Are we seeking a, I'll need to,
Do
do
you know the
talk to
date?
staff.
For the current.
You set the date and we'll put it around.
Okay. So it's an optional, the date is floating. So the city currently has access to that until, I can't remember the date,
October 1st.
October 1st, is that what?
I thought it was September.
For the next couple of months at
Right.
least, because of our extension. So if it was in the next couple of months, we could do it
And then-
without access to our city days. However, we want to use a city day, and if it's government and you guys find it as a government purpose, then we could use a city day for it. So either way, it's up to you on how you accomplish it if it's government purpose.
Do we need to, if we need to approve it based on Mr. Layton submitting a date, I would move that we approve allowing the federal program, the arts program to be.
It's a Congressional Art
conducted-
Competition.
Congressional Arts
Yeah.
Competition to be conducted at the
I
Flagler
would-
Center.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for approval to negotiate and find time to use the Flagler Center before our lease, I guess, resumes in earnest with the Stewart Main Street.
Well, it's either that or using a Stewart Day. I didn't know.
Yes, well, yes.
So using a Stewart Day. Okay, the motion is to use a Stewart Day. And seconded, the motion by Vice Mayor Clark and a second by Commissioner Glass-Layton. So this is a federal program. This has nothing to do with a campaign or with an
That is correct.
individual representative.
Congressional Art Competition.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So all the students throughout all the local high schools participate, submit art, and then we have local artists come and actually judge. And the winner's actual art gets to be hung in the Capitol, and then we always take second and third and put them in our DC office. So gives them the opportunity for their families to come up and take a look at it, and also for them to be recognized as the top artist in the area. So we want to keep it local. Unfortunately, the Arts Council is too small right now with everything going on. And rather than work through anybody, I wanted to come straight to you all and then work with staff moving forward. So,
Okay, thank you, sir.
And we can save the federal government some money in the process.
look at that. Lastly, congratulations on your last meeting. What a remarkable time, the words that you all said, and more importantly, what you have done for the city. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any public comment on this motion to use a city day for the Congressional Arts Contest? Do we have any online, sir?
Stand by. If there's anyone on Zoom that wishes to give public comment, please raise your hand now on the item, the first and second, for using.
I see one there, Mr. Rothstein.
Cannot.
The effort on the part of, the administrators who helped
Hello?
put this together.
Yes, sir.
And I like the
Am I unmuted?
touching all
Yes, sir.
students, because it's also
I spoke to Congressman Maskell. This is Tom Campetti. I spoke to Congressman Maskell's, and I had given them the day they requested. So I don't quite understand.
That means it'll be easy to coordinate.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Campeni. So just to follow up on that, so if we don't need to exhaust a city day, I would prefer us not to exhaust a city day if it's already being offered.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just matters when they decide to give the date.
Historically, we've never actually used all of the city days in a
Sure.
single year.
And then is it Mr. Rothstein is?
He's for a general public
Okay.
comment.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Seeing no other comment, is this all in favor?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously.
Move approval of the consent.
Second.
We're not done.
We have one more
comment
public comment, I believe.
yet.
Oh, sorry.
You have one more green card or just online?
Did you say that, Mr. Rothstein?
Yep.
I don't have another green card for general.
Stand by. Mr. Rothstein, you're.
Yes, my name is Marcus Rothstein. I live at 608 Southwest Cleveland Avenue in Stewart. I'm on Zoom video conference. Thank you for setting this up for us. I appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly, for your service and the whole commission for working through this time. I didn't see this item on the agenda, so I wanted to bring it up. There's affordable housing that's being discussed at 603 Southwest Federal Highway. And there's a sign up there that said, at least the last time I walked by it, that they're approaching the city to ask to waive the requirement for a sewer connection in order to, continue to connect to their, I guess, grandfathered in septic system. This site and the septic site is about 100 feet or maybe less from the Fraser Creek, which drains into the South Fork of the St. Lucie and into the cojoined rivers. And I am highly against of having them, be able to bypass the sewer connection. And I would like to go on record as asking the city to do whatever it can to ensure that they connect to the sewers and avoid any septic drainage into the rivers.
Thank you, Mr. Rothstein.
And just for clarification, I know the sign was up, but the applicant withdrew his request to go before commission.
And I can tell you,
And I guess that means that it's a moot point now. They will connect to the sewer.
Yes, the original stipulations would stand.
and he's entering into a utility services agreement with the city of Stewart. And I saw a copy of that through email today with him and the utilities department to move forward on that.
Super. Thank you. Thank you all so much for supporting this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other general comment?
I see no other hands via Zoom, sir, and no one at Flagler Center.
Okay.
Motion
Commissioner?
to approve the consent?
Second.
I have a motion to approve the consent calendar by Commissioner Glass-Leighton and a second by Vice Mayor Clark. Is there any comment on the board? Any question? Any public comment on consent, items 4, 5, and 6? Seeing none in the room. Any online, Mr. Dias?
I see no one with their hands up for the consent approval.
Okay. Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bruner,
Yes.
Commissioner Glass Layton,
Yes.
Commissioner Matheson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Mayor Meyer.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 7, on commission action, Shops on Colorado Annex MUCCU.
I will go ahead and read the resolution. This is Shops on Colorado Annex Major Urban Code Conditional Use. Resolution number 55-2020, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Stuart, Florida, considering a major urban code conditional use approval to allow the deviation of requirements regarding the principal building placement, front street facade width, parking location, and certain architectural requirements within the urban center zoning district, approving plans for development to allow the construction of 11,929 square feet of commercial office retail and restaurant within 2 buildings, providing an effective date, providing for a timetable of development, and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Stephen Mayer for the record. The item before you tonight is the Shops at Colorado. It's a major urban code conditional use approval. It's resolution 2020, sorry. And it is a major urban code conditional use approval to allow deviations of requirements regarding the principal building placement, the front street facade width, which is factored as a percentage of the total width, the parking location, and then certain architectural requirements that are within the urban center zoning district. And it is approving a site plan for development to allow the construction of 11,929 square feet of office in 2 separate buildings. The mailed notices were sent out to property owners within 300 feet on April 24th, and the sign was posted noticing the hearings on Colorado. And see there, picture of that. And the site location is on the west side of South Colorado Avenue to the south of Kruger Creek, and then north of the Shops of Colorado that exists. Some might note that there's a Fruits and Roots there.
As well as other businesses.
As other businesses, that's correct. All right. The existing land use is urban district, as well as all the adjacent land uses are urban district. The existing zoning is urban center. There is majority of the adjacent property owners are also urban centered. There's an urban highway to the south as well, slightly connected to it as well. Across from the creek, there is some urban waterway, urban neighborhood up there. The applicant is required to request the major urban code conditional use due to following deviations of code. First is the principal building location. The front facade shall be constructed parallel to the street along the front property line with a required build-to line of 0 feet. The proposed site plan has a build-to line of 11.1 feet, so it is further from the front than the code requires by 11.1 feet. The reasons are there's some reasons in the staff report for that, and one of the major reasons for that is the way that the sidewalk is coming from the creek. There's a bridge across the creek, and there's a sidewalk that juts in and then back out, and that is not really allowing the property owner to take full advantage of where the property line is. And so they want to put the patio in the front as much as possible to get that build-to line, but the actual building will be 11.1 feet back. The facade width is required in the urban center to be 80% of the entire lot width. However, the proposed site plan has a building facade of only 27%. There is justification to this, however. There is a 50-foot right-of-way that takes up 50 feet of the entire lot width. which exists currently between the existing shops and the proposed. There is also a 10-foot shoreline protection zone to the north side, protecting from the creek. And there is a force main easement that is also just to the north of the 50-foot right-of-way. All these take into account, the lot width is more of a usable frontage of 48 feet and very close to the 80%.
I have a quick question, Mr. Mayor. Just this to me, from what I understand, this is kind of just a technicality. 27% is only that first portion. The remaining building, when I look at the elevation, it does take up the majority of the lot. It's just that it's behind the right-of-way parking that was established from the original shops in Colorado. Is that what you're
It's
trying
the
to say?
frontage. It's 27% of the frontage width. So the frontage width along Colorado is
Colorado. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
The code also requires in this zoning district that the minimum building height be 2 stories and 26 feet, or 26 feet. The proposed building is single-storied, and the top of the parapet wall is exactly at 26. The top of the roof is at 24.4, and it is designed to appear like a 2-storied structure. So in this regard, though technically not meeting the 26 feet at the top of the roof, if you include the parapet wall, it is meeting the intent of having that high of a structure. Parking location is in the code is that all parking shall be located behind the rear facade of the principal building or screened from public right-of-way by a street wall or other screening approved by a city development director. The applicant is proposing to screen the parking along the side of the building with landscaping, and it is up to your approval to see if that is enough screening for for the parking to be in view of Colorado. And then finally, there are a few architectural requirements that are not being met. One of them is due to not having a second story. Balconies are required along the street for all facades buildings, and they would not possibly be able to do that without a second story. It doesn't seem feasible. Also, ground floor frontage along the front facade shall have doorways, arcades, and glazed openings with an aggregate width of at least 50%. And although they do not provide the arcades or balconies that we're requesting, there is a restaurant use with a patio in the front, and the street frontage will be will have the railings, which will give that hard edge to the sidewalk, but we'll also have overhead garage doors that will be open during the use that will amount to more than 50% when those are open. Now, let me get to the site design layout, but staff, we'd like, we did have conversations with the applicant beforehand about the site plan that Kev would like to.
So very early on in the process, as you all may recall from the street view of Colorado, there are a number of oak trees that front this location. So very early on in the process, having in mind where the restrictions that the applicant had on their easements and on the other restrictions on the site, we did discuss with them. It was September in 2019, and followed up with an on-site meeting in October 2019 to talk about the retention of those oak trees on front of that site. So I want the Commission to be aware that we raised the issue, we gave it some importance, and the applicant is here to justify why they are not able to maintain those oak trees in front there. It probably was, actually it was, the most important item that we foresaw in the request that was being made today. So I just wanted to put that on Commission's minds.
Thank you, sir.
So in the site plan, you can see that, first of all, the two buildings are here in the white sections, and they will have the restaurant use as well as office and some retail uses that be permitted to form into those two buildings. The parking, which is meeting code, are actually going to be in these locations in this gray, and they're going to be impervious surface parking.
Pervious.
Pervious parking. Oh, thank you. Pervious parking or pavers is what's going to be located in these areas here. There is some on-street parking that currently exists that would be utilized now as parking for this for these uses. There is stormwater improvements that the applicant will address with you located here and as well as there. The dumpster location, just for your knowledge, is located right there. The landscape plan is shown and is in your packet. You can see primarily what we're looking for is number one, we have the 10-foot shoreline construction zone along where Fraser Creek is. That should be protected and is part of code to require that 10-foot construction-free setback. You'll also note that right in this location is the landscaping that you would be approving as screening for the parking that's located right in this area here. The applicant has given us architectural renderings, which will show what that looks like from Colorado. And you can see here some of the impediments to providing that zero lot or build to line right here is the sidewalk and the bridge, which you see with the railing and those park benches actually coming down from that small bridge. Yes.
I see the shops in the front parallel with Colorado. It's, I'm trying to understand this. Are the buildings going along the creek? Are they going to have a face front? Are they going to be parking? Is it right?
So these buildings right here, they're going to be facing their parking areas. That's correct. The buildings that you see in the rendering, it would be that building
What I
there.
just saw, yeah.
That you just saw would be that building front right there, which would be the restaurant.
Okay, and then as it goes back over to the building around the creek, yes. What's going to be back there?
That's the back of the building.
That's it?
That's it.
No boardwalks, no nothing you can walk around on the creek?
No, ma'am.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? That back of the building, you said that's going to have the 10-foot shoreline buffer?
The back of the building will have the buffer.
Okay.
And so there is a visual of the rest of the shops as they face their parking area. That's going back towards, like you're asking about. That's the relief or the elevation you're looking for.
It just looks like to me like you just set a Publix right in there. I don't know.
Well, the use wouldn't allow a big box Publix, but it could have a grocer, a smaller grocer. So staff and the CRB recommends approval of resolution 55-2020. And the applicant will now address with their presentation some concerns that were raised at the Community Redevelopment Board. One of them including drainage and stormwater capacity of the site, and the engineering that they propose, the traffic impact and circulation, and also the obtaining proper permits for the ability to trim the mangroves along Fraser Creek.
Mr. Mayor, I have a quick question for you. I couldn't quite see it on my computer screen. I had to pull up my laptop, but on the site plan, there's a line and it says existing top of bank, and it's in, I don't know, roughly 10 feet in from the 10-foot set shoreline protection setback. Can you elaborate on that, the existing top of the bank? So that's, I mean, the shoreline protection, they're using the mean high water, and they're adding 10 feet from that. But what is the existing top of the bank where this building would cover that? And we know that, is that because this property is shaped like a water retention pond? What do they mean by that existing top of the bank, I guess?
I'll have to actually see before I can comment.
pull up the site plan.
Sorry, I was
Just
switching to the applicants because it's quite large, so I closed yours out.
Sorry.
Where is it at, Merritt, the site plan?
In the site plan.
It would be about there.
Well, without, I mean, obviously, without seeing it close enough hand, I mean, top of bank would be the location of, it's not necessarily mean high water mark, because the mean high water mark of any water body is not exactly where you would have the top of the bank. I mean,
I guess I've just never, this is something new to me. I'm not
yeah,
a land planner, but I haven't noticed this on other surveys.
right. We would take the mean high water mark as the place where you
Begin the 10
begin the
feet.
10 feet. There is such a thing as with the mangroves, a drip line.
I'm just looking for what this line denotes.
This
as
is
the top of
bank.
bank.
For the record, Commissioner Matheson is referring to a dash line that's in the survey that actually shows itself within the geographic nature of the building itself. But if you go to that area too, there is a drop down to the creek. I think the question becomes, is that the top of the bank for the stormwater drainage ditch? Or is that the top of the bank of the dropping into the creek? And I don't have the answer to
Yeah,
that.
I don't believe that's to the creek. I think that's to the top of bank of the
Existing
of the
stormwater.
existing stormwater.
But is this an existing stormwater? I mean, I don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
So that's the top of the stormwater bank.
That's correct.
So all this development is actually going to be on top of fill that's going to be put in an existing stormwater retention area.
Okay. I think, thank you, Steve.
That's right.
Can I ask about the garage doors again? Those will be facing Colorado?
Those would be facing Colorado.
That'll be their little storefront.
Yes, yes. When the restaurant's open, they'll be opening up those doors to allow people to sit outside and eat there, and also when they're inside, be able to see outside. But otherwise, when it's closed, the garage doors will be closed.
And Mr. Mayor, to follow up on that, that's just for the restaurant or the garage doors for each of the second building as well?
That's just for the restaurant.
Okay. Will it be for loading and unloading, or is it just to look like a garage door? I mean.
Well, it is, I mean, I prefer the applicant to talk.
Okay.
About, yeah, the use.
Yeah, I didn't quite see it on the elevations, so. Are there any other questions for Mr. Mayor before we move on to the applicant?
No, I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure we'll get you
Do you want
again.
to see the pictures yet, Mr. Brown? We do have those available for you as soon as we can get them.
Pictures. Say pictures?
Yeah.
Pictures?
Pictures, yes.
While he's looking for those, I should note, I'm going to swear the applicant, and this is technically a land use. Although it's called an urban code conditional use, you should know that this is somewhat similar to an ordinance, and it does give development rights, but it is a single hearing process.
So should we be following quasi-judicial?
It's the quasi-judicial form is not a magical form. So yes, we should be following. It should be in the form of evidence, and you guys are weighing the criteria from a standpoint of quasi-judicial perspective. But the fact that we're not on the orange sheet isn't critical.
Okay.
I
Thank
do
you.
have a couple more questions for Steve.
Okay. Commissioner Bruner has a few more questions for you while we find the photos.
Stephen, with the garage door, the front they want to do, it says patio. Is that the width of that? Is that the same width as Roots and Fruits or whatever that's called? Is that the same width?
I am not sure. Is it?
Rather than asking someone in the audience, it'd be better for you
Well,
just to say you don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure the width of that. I know from the applicant that the proposed is something of a parallel to the existing. So they're trying to make it look as much as the existing as possible.
Right.
So I think the intent is there to make that similar, but I don't know the exactness of the width.
Okay. Looks like it.
Mhm.
Are we looking for pictures of what? I'm sorry.
We have some pictures of the existing street front.
Okay.
What I'm trying to pull up the applicant's presentation. We're having technical difficulties on two different machines, so trying to work out a conversion. for that.
Okay, well, then I'll continue to dig in with staff. Mr. Mayor, so I like the CRB had some concerns about the stormwater, the existing stormwater on site. I understand that, staff is satisfied that this project will be able to accommodate its own stormwater. What methods are we using to do that? I mean, is there underground, is it exfiltration, or we're not dumping into the creek, or are we?
I know that their engineer will go over that in detail.
Okay.
While you're waiting, you could hear from their testimony.
Do we need to swear anybody in?
Yeah, we're gonna need to swear anybody for the applicant.
Why don't we do that now while we're
Okay.
waiting?
Let the record reflect that there are a bunch of gangsters in the room. Let the record reflect that there are 3 people being sworn for the applicant. Will you please raise your right hand? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect all 3 have testified affirmatively, and if you could please state your name when you testify. When you testify.
Thank you, Mr.
That way when
Martel.
you're up at the microphone.
So the pictures I can bring up, if you'd like to see those pictures that Mr. Meyer is referring to. However, their applicant's presentation is crashing, and Mr. Freeman is going up to his office to try to convert it. These are the pictures that he was referring to, Mr. Meyer was referring to.
Yes, sorry. So Commissioner Mathis and I included the 2 pictures that show the existing existing trees condition on on Colorado Avenue. You can actually see where the sign is, and so that's the frontage of the property. And there's another picture that shows it from the opposite angle. You can see some existing trees there. The applicant is on page 3 of the landscape plan. The applicant is proposing to remove those trees, mitigate for those trees in their landscaping plan. But of course, those trees do provide quite a bit of shade that we had originally attempted to save. Is there the second picture?
Yes, sir, sorry.
Those are the oak trees you're referring to, right?
Right.
The 3 oak trees.
Right. I think there's a total of 4.
Or 4.
Yeah.
And for the applicant, I assume that the challenge is trying to meet our code that we built, the build to line. So we've got trees sort of in the way of our own desire for the look of Colorado.
Exactly. Exactly true. There are potential ways you could save the tree and still have the patio out there, but of course, that is something that is negotiable in this major urban code conditional use approval. Yeah.
For example, potentially moving the end of the patio beyond the tree into the property a bit more.
That's one option.
Okay.
Or something like the blue door.
Commissioner?
While we have this up, I just want to, I guess, get confirmation for myself. That photo where you see where the bridge starts. So the building is going to end just 10 feet from the water bank there? Is that what you were referring to as the 10-foot buffer?
That's correct. There's a 10-foot construction-free zone between the mean high water mark of the creek and where they can begin construction of the building.
10 feet, just 10 feet?
And
that's what's in our code?
That's what's in our code. It's not this area is not we don't have the same wetland buffer. It's not considered a wetland. It just, we just protect.
If you think about across the street where the it's not Penn Plaza, but it's.
The Raymond building.
Where I think, and those offices, when you're in any of those offices, they're very close to the canal. And I don't even know when.
They're on
built.
stilts, it's underneath them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know when those were built, but that was built a long time ago.
When were they built?
I don't
It
know.
just seems so close to me, that's all. So close to the creek bed.
And on that, within that 10 feet, there are existing mangroves there that would help to keep that bank stabilized.
That's correct.
But I assume the applicant would need to have those, which they'll talk about, I'm sure, need to have those trimmed or what have you to build up to.
That's exactly right. It is an urban code to diminish that to 10 feet. If this was not an urban code, you would have more of a buffer.
So I guess if we have time, in the picture, the building would go past where the railing starts, as Commissioner Layton said.
Certainly appears that way.
Well past it.
I'm not sure I follow, but
With the bridge, see the base of the bridge, the building would go past that. If there's only a 10-foot
yes, that's
buffer, it would
correct.
go, yeah.
yes, that is right.
How are we looking on the
Almost done with the
presentation?
conversion, sir.
Okay.
So there won't be any drive-through around the back. You won't be able to make a semi to go around. Everything will be delivered in the front, it looks like.
Yeah, unless they're bringing it by boat.
Commissioner Bruner, could you speak directly into the microphone?
Yeah.
Well, according to the site plan, Commissioner, there is parking behind the second building, not the one that's kind of at a tilt along Fraser Creek. There is parking and right of way behind the second.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, see it.
Well, I know it's helpful for us to have everything, but at least the commission, we have staff report and the items that were attached online. Could we perhaps have, Mr. Mortel, is it legal for us to continue without
Absolutely.
the public seeing this?
I mean, pictures are not a requirement.
We have it, sir.
Okay, great. Please. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry for the wait. We're normally pretty technically savvy here.
No problem. So a little bit about us. I'm Kristen Brown, by the way, for the record. I'm with Ted Glassford Associates. We are a real estate holding and development company. And we first came to Stewart back in 1995 when we purchased the Royal Palm Financial Center, which is right there on US 1. We have a lot of development we've done in Martin County since then. Most recently, we've been purchasing some properties along the Colorado corridor. We have a 555 Place building where you have Crafted K again, and Portico's Bakery and Taco Shack. We remodeled that years ago. We did the 612 building where the Lotus Room is. It's a hairdresser. And then most recently, we did purchase the Shops on Colorado building where the Fruits and Roots building is. This particular piece of property we have owned, I think since 1997. We actually built the Construction Journal building on part of this property, and this one's been vacant ever since. We go to the next slide. I did take some pictures also. This is your existing conditions. It shows the lot from the east side, from the west side, and then kind of straight on a little bit so you can see what is existing there. You can see the Construction Journal building in the background and also the existing Shops on Colorado building. You can see where the fence is along the Fraser Creek Bridge, along with your benches that you have out there. It is a unique little piece of property, as everybody has been saying. You guys already saw these. I'm going to let him flip right through those. Those are the renderings that we had done that this is our vision for the building. We are trying to make it so that it looks like it's always been there. We're trying to make it so that it's uniform with that existing Shops on Colorado building. We intend on calling it also Shops on Colorado, so that it looks almost, it's cohesive. You will feel like you're walking from one to the other. It's almost, lends to each other. So people go back and forth. You go to the coffee shop or, go grab a piece of pizza or something like that. This is the site plan you already saw. I'm not going to rehash all that. I will say, you've got 7th Avenue, and I'll try to address some of that parking issue that you were asking me about with the deliveries. So we are intending on putting a restaurant in the front there. The rest of the use will be office or retail use. So you do have parking in the back of the building that's along 7th Street there. And we did build a breezeway. This is essentially 2 buildings, even though it's going to have 1 roof line. So you've got a breezeway coming in the middle. So the majority of your employees or your deliveries would be made to the back of the building. And they can come through the breezeway to deliver to the front. You won't be able to walk along Fraser Creek. We won't have a sidewalk along there or anything, but you can deliver through the breezeway and around the front. So you won't have your semis along Colorado Avenue there, like we have, the problem on the other property. Okay. This is a floor plan of a suggested floor plan that we foresee. It shows a mixture of office and retail. You can see in the front the restaurant area, and this kind of details your overhead doors. I'm not going to call them garage doors. They're overhead doors. They're going to be impact glass. So if you think about a single garage door with 9 panes of glass in it, and not an actual garage door that's going to be opaque, it's actually going to be a window. So the front along there is going to be all window, and then during nice weather, during January, February, they can be opened and they'll have screens or no screens, depending on what the restaurant wants to use. That way it'll be open out to the patio area. But in the summertime, I would anticipate they'd probably be closed to keep the air conditioning inside. But that's what the intent is. It's not an actual garage door. It is an architectural feature. But they will be operable.
And I beg your pardon. So that will be only fronting Colorado. Is there to be the same kind of?
No, only along Colorado there,
okay.
Yes.
And these
correct.
are impact glass.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a corrugated metal rolling door.
No.
Okay.
No. That's
All
why I was
right.
hearing you guys, get confused about, it's not going to be anything ugly like that. It's supposed to be a really nice feature. You see them a lot in some of your remodeling in some of the urban areas. They actually take the old garage doors out and put these in as a remodel kind of thing. Make it look kind of rustic. So along Fraser Creek there, you're asking about what that's going to look like on the other side. All along the creek where we have the office and the restaurant, that's all going to be large windows overlooking that. So if you rented an office in the back, you'd have a really good view of the creek. We're also putting awnings over that. So whenever you see it from coming from the east, or I guess the north in this case, I'm sorry, when you're coming from the north, you'll see windows and not just, the back of the building. We're trying to make it as pleasant view as possible. We also, I talked to somebody over at the DEP. They regulate the mangroves. You're asking about the waterway there. They regulate what you're allowed to trim on the mangroves because it's essentially you're not allowed to remove mangroves. And they say you can trim up to about 25% of them and then maintain them from there. We do intend on windowing those mangroves, bringing them up. And they are very tall already. There's not going to be a lot of trimming involved. Bring them up so that you can see kind of through the trunks of them, see to the creek and see to the building from the other side. So you can have office space in there, you can have retail space in there. It's all very small, definitely couldn't fit a Publix in there. That largest space right there is about 3,500, 4,000 square feet in the front there. The rest of them are about 1,200 square feet, something like that. And that is our building elevation. The top is what it would look like if you didn't have the creek there whatsoever, and you could actually see the whole entire building. And the bottom it kind of shows how it angles back This is our landscape plan. I'm going to let him flip forward since you guys already saw this one too, the colored landscape plan. That's the next slide. So this is what it actually looks like in color. It helps visualize it a little bit better. If you have any questions about that, our landscape architect is here. He can answer any questions about that. We did try to buffer the parking from Colorado as was required by code so that you don't see as much parking from the front. It was a little bit of a challenge with this building because you couldn't push it all the way to the front. You do have to have adequate parking. So we did have to, bring some to the side. Something else I want to bring into to your attention, we did add a bioretention area right along the existing roadway easement there to allow for drainage also.
To the left, right? Just
Yeah, the little, that
right
area
there,
right
the
there.
little rain garden.
Mhm. And that is all I have to show you right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions if I haven't. I think I trust everything you already brought up. Other than the trees, I know we talked about the trees, and yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge to get the 0 lot line and still maintain those oak trees. Now we are amenable to moving those oak trees. We are placing oak trees on the property. We think we've actually put a lot of trees on the property. We're trying to make it look like, it's always been there and mature. So we were discussing that earlier. That's something we'd be agreeable to because we know they are nice oak trees. But yeah, that was the biggest challenge was creating a building that looks uniform to the one next door. I don't know if it's exactly the same width, but it's similar. But we're trying to recreate it so that it looks like it's always been there together.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions for Ms. Brown?
I wanted to ask you, I know I'm getting the name wrong, Fruits and Roots. Is that your building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner?
Ms. Brown, are you going to address the drainage with us, or is
I'll let
another
Mr. Mathers do
Okay.
that.
So regarding the trees, before we move on, because I have a couple questions with drainage as well. So it seems to me that staff was pretty strongly insistent on maintaining those trees there.
They let us know that, yeah, it was a concern, sure.
Right, and even though, from what I understand, the idea to the 0 lot line is kind of our code. So I'm just thinking if staff would like to preserve those trees and forgive a little on the 0 lot line build out, I mean, is it possible to preserve those trees and just push in a little bit?
So I think we're going to lose half of our front building. I know it doesn't look like those trees are very, it looks like they're further forward, but they're a lot further back than you think they are. Whether or not they'd actually survive the construction process is a whole nother thing. There's a lot of variables involved with that because you'd have to protect them and there's a lot of fill going to be brought in and that kind of thing. We definitely wouldn't get the same kind of look. It definitely wouldn't have a uniform look with the building next door.
Could we bring up the landscape plan, Mr. Dias, just so we can look at what we're talking about?
While we're thinking about that.
Hold on, I'm still going on. I beg your pardon, Vice
Yes,
Mayor.
that's a question.
Okay.
Are those trees slash pines or Australian pines?
Oh no, they're oaks.
They're oak
They're
trees.
They're
Live
okay.
oak trees.
Oh, they're the ones up front.
Okay, so we're talking about right there along Colorado. So so you are amenable to a condition that that we could do on-site mitigation. They could be, or rather, move them on-site somewhere on the property.
Yes. For the record, Dan Stevenson with Gentile Glass, Holloway Matthews Associates, landscape architect for the project. Yeah, the extensive work that has to happen in that location, those trees would not survive. We took a look at it. The bridge abutment is actually much higher. The trees, the root system is much lower. Bringing that elevation up to accommodate the building and the patio, they would not survive. So talking with the applicant, certainly are amenable to relocating them and reusing them on site. They are very nice trees. There's time to root prune and take specific precautions to do it properly. So they are amenable, which is rare. Most wouldn't. So
very good.
That's a good thing. Just to sort of expand on the oak tree situation. The character along Colorado is as everyone knows, is the crepe myrtle. So this is one of the few locations in there that kind of distracts you from that look. So after taking a look at the oak trees and knowing that they weren't going to survive the construction process between the utility improvements and the building improvements and whatnot, we did institute putting additional crepe myrtles, not only on the property, but outside the property to emphasize that look along Colorado that I think the city was trying to obtain all along there. So it was really sort of a balancing act, and I think they did a great job. We did a great job.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that.
So there are 2 oak trees that are being placed in the existing parking lot area just as you enter the site on Colorado, off of Colorado. So those 2 oak trees right there, that's existing parking. They're going to convert that from non-pervious to pervious parking. And then beyond that, the parking that you see, further in from there on the road is also existing parking that will convert to pervious paving. The rain garden does not have oak trees because we have to be conscious of the water and the attenuation in there. So those are actually red maples. So all the trees, all the plant material in that entire island around that parking is all going to be a pretty cool bioretention rain garden. But those at least 2 of those oak trees can go right in that first bank of parking right there.
So my concern really, I don't want to see the oak trees go, especially them being as majestic as they are, and I appreciate you being willing to relocate them on site. And for our purposes, although right now Colorado the look is the crepe myrtle, we've discussed a lot here about maintaining shade trees and encouraging shade trees along our rights of way, especially Colorado, where it's our intention to have a much more pedestrian-oriented plan as we go, especially south. So perhaps we could, in the landscaping that area that they'll replace those 3 trees. I'm guessing are crepe myrtles that you intend to place right there. If those aren't already existing, perhaps we could look at either, pruning the crepe myrtles in a way that would encourage them to be more of a tall shade tree, or another variety that would cast shade over that sidewalk. That's my main issue. It's just losing the shade on the sidewalk.
Absolutely. Yeah, the crepe myrtle certainly can be trimmed to accommodate what you're asking for. You bet.
Commissioner?
Quick question about the existing parking that you mentioned. Is it the same for in the middle, that existing parking lot? Will be losing any existing, or was it the same amount that will be there? So like in the third.
Site plan question, all I know is that they're converting the existing into pervious. Is there additional?
Like in the third slide, but it's an actual picture now, and you see the gravel parking lot. Are in the transition, are you going to lose any of that parking?
If you'd please speak into the microphone for our.
I'm sorry, for the record, the parking that is already there is going to be maintained the same. We are simply making it pervious for drainage. So all of that parking will stay, and then we're going to add additional parking also. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Are there any questions for the landscape architect?
So your opinion that you would destroy the trees, is that because the design of the porch, the patio? And that's a poured slab patio, correct?
Yeah, it's a poured slab. So the bridge abutment, so there's requirements for construction of the building. It has to be elevated above a certain distance of the road to maintain the proper elevation for engineering standards. So bringing the building up and adding that fill material around the tree would basically kill the tree, in addition to all the utility work that has to happen there. So not just the trees by the building, but the trees that are further away from the building would be impacted by the utility work and all the drainage work. So in order to accommodate all that and all that change in elevation, those trees wouldn't survive. So by relocating them, they can be repurposed.
So you'd say there's no possible way you could build that building and keep those trees there?
Not the way that it's configured and the way the code reads.
As long as the code reads. Okay. All right, I don't have more questions at this time.
Okay, I'd like to, I think we have some questions for perhaps the engineer. Who's a friendly face?
I'm gonna miss you doing. Why don't you do this? I'd be happy to.
Ours might be better.
Thank you, sir.
You're gonna earn your pay tonight.
Oh, you got it.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Bill Mathers, and I am the Mathers Engineering Corporation, and we are doing the civil engineering for the project before you.
Mr. Mathers, if you'd just speak up a little bit, I beg your pardon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can we raise that for him, maybe?
Yeah.
Raise the mic. He's gonna make it a little bit higher.
Ben.
Yeah.
Too darn tall. Thank you, sir.
Let me start with just a couple of simple, if you look at the graphics, the yellow is the pervious concrete that would be put on the property. Underneath that pervious concrete, there'll be layers of stone, 1 to 2 feet, all right? The purpose of that is to allow not only the pervious concrete that will percolate water through it, but it will also provide void storage in the stone, which is 50% in the rock. Plus, we count the void storage in the soil below it. So it gives us a lot of rainfall that those areas can usually absorb 8 to 10 inches of water just into the void, okay? The yellow line or the orange line is an exfiltration trench system. And that's doing 2 things. One is taking the parking lot up front, and that is transferring that to that area to the left, which is blue. All right, that's an open retention area that I was able to keep them from planting anything in. And so that has a purpose as well. The rain garden up front is, I think probably, you can get a better explanation of it, but it's more of a stone garden with plants that can survive, wetted areas, because that water is intended to go across the pervious concrete and it will take the overflow into those areas. There is a trench underneath that area that'll transfer water from one side to the other, and the exfiltration trench that you see up in the top area, that's underneath the pervious concrete. The piping and exfiltration trenches are actually not only to take care of water, but they transfer water that may be overly coming in on one of the pavement areas. It'll absorb it and transfer it to an area that's got less. So it's also acting as an equalizer. The blue area, and I met Friday with Mrs. Barnes and her sister, and they had some legitimate concerns about that area. And because there are 3 pipe systems already dumping into that area. I guess best way, there is a pipe network coming in where you see the dumpster. Just to the north of that, there's an existing pipe coming into about where the blue area is. That's about where, if you had aerials, that's actually been dug out, that area. And that's where we have a overflow from the, it's a weird system that back into the other building, they've got pervious concrete exfiltration trenches. There's a weir in there that the water has to build. It can't go through a little small bleeder. It has to overflow that weir. And that was designed for design storms. So you're talking about 25-year, 3-day rainfalls. So there's no contribution from that until we hit major storms. But we've tied that into that blue area. So any water coming out of there will be going through into our systems. The other piece is on the south end of that blue area. On the bottom of it, there's another culvert that comes into that area. And that's taking a minimum amount of water. It's some green areas across the roadway, back in there on the south side of the building, which is the lower end of your screen. That one we have tied also in to the system. The other one is just about where you see the letters existing there on the parking lot. There's water coming off the parking lot that goes over the boundary and it gets into a swale, and then there's a culvert and a catch basin there, and that culvert will be tied into the area that you see as blue. So we're taking all the water that is being generated now that was going into that original retention area there, about where the blue swale is, or the blue area. The water, there's 3-foot elevation difference between where the blue area is on the main drive. It drops 3 feet from there to Colorado. So what we're doing is we're taking the roadway water in the pervious concrete areas, we're actually lowering those from where they are now so that we intercept as much of that water there with pervious concrete instead of getting down to Colorado.
So to clarify, the top of the bank of the proposed retention area you're saying is 3 feet below Colorado, or the bottom of that?
No, that's the road.
The road.
Okay, the road itself on the south side, bottom of your page, it actually drops 3 feet from there to the elevation of Colorado. Okay, so the water that's coming down that is being transferred. We're going to put it in the pervious concrete because it all slopes towards the pervious concrete. So we're actually lowering those current parking spaces so that the water then pulls over into those areas so it doesn't transfer down to Colorado. The other issues that you have questions on is the purple line, which is the 10-foot setback line. All right. That line was generated by the environmental consultant that in the field, they go and they have to stake these lines along with the other agencies. One was the Corps of Engineers. And so the Corps of Engineers actually looked in the field, verifications with them. They decided that where that line was is the purple line next to the creek, that side of it. Okay, that's the Corps calls it a jurisdictional determination. Okay, so that's how that line got established, and then the rest of it is the setback. The area that you see that is, it says, top of berm, toe of slope and stuff. Okay. There's a berm that goes all along there, and then what you see is that line. This used to be a trailer park, and well, I'm guessing a little bit, but when they developed the original buildings, they removed the trailer park. So they had to take out the concrete. They took out, all your underground, the pavements and stuff. And then I think they probably used some of the fill. It's good sands. So that area was created probably from a combination of that. The berm, I'm not sure if it was really built or just left what was left over, and they excavated the other stuff out. But that is a berm that goes along there. The point is, in which also was asked of me, was from Tracy or Mrs. Barnes, was what about the creek rising? So what we have decided that what we are doing, we just haven't detailed it at this point yet, but the top of that berm is elevation about 5.5. It varies from 5.3 to 5.8 or so. your current revised flood level, okay, with the new FEMA maps, they actually raised it 1/2 foot, which it is now elevation 5 under the new, NADV, elevation. So what we're going to do is when they build the building, we're going to be able to go on that side of the creek side, and we'll get rid of the berm, and we can actually lower it so that we can add to the floodplain. Okay, so that's how we're looking at do some compensation so that we can take and, reduce the flood level. So, but we're not going to get in to the purple area. Most of that is this side of it. But that's one way we can actually help the floodplain a little bit by reducing that 5 to 4, maybe 3 in some cases. But that's how that all comes into play. So let's see. I think there's probably some more questions. I just can't remember what they were at this
Sure.
point.
We'll remind you. Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. I'm just trying to simplify it. You gave a lot of very beneficial information. Much of went straight over my head.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So explain to me, in its current condition today, with all the rain that we've been having, where's the water runoff, the retention existing today, right now?
It's, if you had an aerial about where the blue area that we're going to be putting in a retention area, right in that area, maybe a little bit more towards the building, and it's bigger than that. It goes up to the beyond the dumpster area, and it goes a little bit further down to the south.
You can see that when you drive by it. That's the area that you see.
Yeah, and that's one where all the culverts dump into. But Mrs. Barnes has said they had seen the other area once in a while with some water in it. Okay. This other area will get, a couple of feet of water in it or so when it rains with, from the offsite that is dumping into it. But all that is what we're doing. We do not have a discharge into the, into the creek.
So second question, when you put all these buildings on here, I mean, I'm thinking there's going to be, there's going to be more chance of runoff, right? Because you're not putting concrete on buildings and concrete and parking. Where is all that runoff going to go now with all the buildings? I mean, I heard you say you're putting special gravel in and you're putting special concrete in and trenches. Where is that going to go? Because I'm just having a hard time grasping where it is now in its current condition, and then when you add all of the buildings on it, where is all that going to go?
All right. The water, the building roof systems, they're going to be underground piped. So it'll go down through the roof, it'll be piped. They're going to go into the rear and the front, into where the pervious concrete areas are. So they'll be going into the below the pervious concrete as an option into the stone, or I can put it over the like a normal what do you call it, where you just dump the water on the top of the pavement. All right, we may be doing some of that. They haven't finished the architecturals yet, but either way, it'll go into the pervious concrete and it will be absorbed from the pervious concrete, whether it's initially or it runs off and it gets in the exfiltration trenches, which it'll get into that stone bed. Like I say, it'll be a couple of feet deep underneath the concrete surface, which is pervious. It extracts water very rapidly.
So you're confident there won't be any flooding issues?
That's like, is there going to be a hurricane?
Well, we're all confident there's going to be a hurricane. It's just.
I can tell you, it'll take the hurricane water because that's a far less intense rainfall with a hurricane than it is with the design storms.
Like these last 2 days of rain.
It's been fine. The retention area is dry.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Could I just ask Mr. Mathers one question which might help further what you're talking about? When you have pervious surface with rock underneath, when the water goes through that, does it go into the soil?
Yes, it will.
So,
But we put the rock down because you take a lot of rainfall and you put it through the pervious concrete very rapidly. It'll also start, 2 feet, you get almost half of that. You got 12 inches of water setting in the stone. So it's going to take that water very rapidly. So water is coming off the building. It'll hit these areas and it gets right down into the stone. So it's trapped. It can't go any further. Like I say, the exfiltration trenches will actually take water as well, but it also will spread that water so it equalizes. So the stone under the backside, if it's getting overload, it transfers to the front, vice versa. So it's trying to equalize the entire system. But if you've seen previous concrete in areas, right? Typically, we just put sand underneath it, okay? Well, then it's up to the sand on the rate that it can take it. But initially, it will take quite a bit of water and just fills the voids, all right? The stone acts as a good underground storage. If I put in a tank underneath, it'll actually fill that tank. We'll go into the soil, but the soil slows down quite a bit. It doesn't get into the soil as fast as it will in stone, but it's used for storage. So we can take, 8 inches of rainfall and put it into the pervious concrete, and it's just trapped there. It'll eventually percolate out. But it's just a storage method that we've used that seems to be successful. And, like I say, between the landscape guys and the architects and everything, they don't leave us much.
Right.
But this does work, and it's, again, done our best. And that's where we are today. I'm not saying it may be modified a little bit in the final once they get done with the architectural. But as I told Mrs. Barnes, it's not going to produce water that's going to leave that site.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Mr. Mathers, if I went to the retention pond right now, and I went there this morning, if I dug down, since its proximity to the creek, am I going to hit water the last few days of rain closer, sooner than I would if I was 5 miles from that creek?
Your creek mean high water, it's like minus 0.5 foot elevation. Okay.
Minus point.
Right. The probably not the retention area itself, I think is down around 2.5. So it's about 2 feet above the water table, depending on tidal and stuff. But when we checked it, it was with a mean high water, it'd be close to that usually. High tides in there may go another 0.5 foot. But the ground that's up out of that retention area there, up into that low area, flat area, it's probably around elevation 4. So if you dug a hole up there, you would most likely find it 3 feet deep.
And then you'd hit your water table.
Should hit the stable water table.
But now, this water table in the proximity of the creek is going to fluctuate on tides. So in the fall, when we get some king tides and that creek on average is near the mean high water, the water table is going to be higher. Is that correct?
Yeah, the current FEMA maps have an elevation of elevation 5 for their floodplain, which is, again, like I say, it's pretty close to where that berm is. So by taking out the berm, when we do this, we'll be able to lower that and add storage to the FEMA flood.
Well, I'm not as concerned about Fraser Creek overflowing. I'm more concerned about runoff from Colorado and these developments going into the creek. If Fraser Creek overflowed, but see what we're doing, it seems almost counterintuitive to me to reduce the size of the berm and fill in the so-called swimming pool or retention area near them. And I guess my concern is this area with its proximity to the creek is going to be affected by the tides in the water table. Is that?
The tide, we're always going to affect something, but we're not going to put it where we depend on the tide. All the stone beds and everything else are going to be elevated so that a high tide isn't going to saturate it. So we can still maintain that rainfall amount that we want to hold.
So there's no chance we could ever have, we get 2 high tides a day, a high tide, which raises the water table, and then we have the amount of rain. Because with a higher water table under those stones and the sand under those stones, if the water table, say, touch the bottom of these stones that's being proposed to put in, and then we have the past rains that we had the past 2 days, there's no more capacity to hold that because we've got the water table sitting there.
You're correct. The only thing is the bottom of the stone is going to be close to an elevation about 5 to 6. Okay. So your high tides only run about 1.5 feet at the very highest with the rainfalls coming into the creek from upstream. The city did a good job on that large lake and stuff they built up by Florida Power and Light. You get DOT dumping a ton of water upstream very rapidly. So that always used to flood downstream and cause a lot of problems. And I haven't talked, I think Joe did it. I was going to talk to the engineers to see how they, how much it, helped into the floodplain. But that increase has got to have dampened some of the problems that used to flood, because the flood goes so rapidly from US 1 into that area. You got dumping, the Colorado as well dumps into that creek. And it used to build up as it went downstream. And homes that are towards the river, they are really close to having their yards flooded, even maybe the buildings with the new elevations that the FEMA maps has projected. I don't think there's a problem under the conditions that we just looked at. High tide, heavy rains, they're probably going to be okay. But you just don't know. The FEMA new map, elevation 5, again, it should have been 4.5, but they added 6 inches to it. So it's now actually 6 inches higher than it used to be.
Okay. And so we're gonna, just to confirm, we're gonna take half a foot off that berm roughly.
Well, I can take as much as I want. I don't want to make it where it's sitting in the water, but
No,
certainly
the berm would be lower
it'd be down
than
around,
it is now.
yeah, 3, 2, whatever we can get it without destroying any of the vegetation.
Well, I think that's all my questions for Mr. Mathers. Some discussion, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathers. Appreciate you. Does the applicant have any other witnesses to present? Or, well, Commissioner, you said there's some more discussion.
Yes. So this is certainly a unique piece of property. And when I look at it, I mean, it's right in the center of what we all approved, I think. And I love that we approved it, the Greek, the art district, art downtown. And we're being asked to deviate from some stuff. It's in our power to adjust, the build to lot line in the front. If we want to do something like encourage the applicant to preserve the last remaining shade trees on Colorado, or something like Commissioner Bruner said that I didn't even think of that would be amazing, where there could be a potential boardwalk along the Creek Art District.
All the way to Bruner Pond.
Stuff like that comes to my mind when I look at this property. And I'll be honest with my fellow commissioners, I get terrified of the fact that when I went there this morning, it looks and is a retention pond. Mr. Mathers does give me some comfort in that, but you only get one shot at this type of stuff. And if it runs off and runs in that creek, we did a bad job. And I understand, the physics of it, but I am certainly extremely worried when you get a king high tide or something, which we get all fall. And so that water table is going to be higher twice a day. And that's less storage capacity. And what we're talking about, you fill that retention pond with all these boulders and rocks and then built buildings on top of it, there was just less storage. And I understandably, that's why I believe a lot of the neighbors are concerned. But I know a few things. I know that we got blasted for the removal of all the old oak trees downtown. And there was a legitimate reason for those, because they were literally going into utility lines. And I know that I've heard from residents nonstop about shade trees. And I want shade trees. And I know the residents want them now. They don't want them 7 years from now, the time it takes a crepe myrtle to mature. They'd like them now. And we have them there. And in regards to the oak trees, if the goal is to create something that looks like it's already always been there, in my mind, you'd start with taking less away that's already there. And, I just feel like this project has a lot of potential if you can overcome the major concerns of the stormwater treatment area. But there really should be some good benefit to city residents that would maybe highlight this area. When I go to the Blue Door and sit out on that patio under an oak tree, I'm there, that's incredibly popular, that patio. That to me looks like it's always been there. And, highlighting the aspects of the creek for all Stewart residents would be some of the things I'd really like to see.
And if I could just tell you as a point of clarification, when the group that was working on purchasing the property on Brunner Pond, and as a condition of that included doing a boardwalk, they actually pursued putting a boardwalk in down the creek toward Colorado. And what they learned was that, as was pointed out tonight, they're not allowed to cut the mangroves out. And the mangrove thrush is so thick back there, which is great. It's a very natural habitat, but there is no chance that the DEP is letting anybody cut that out and put a boardwalk in ever. But I just mentioned it so you don't go down the direction of a boardwalk, because it can't be done.
Well, I'm not saying a boardwalk within that 10-foot area.
No, I'm talking about down by the creek, all the way the length of the creek.
Oh, I know. I guess what I'm saying is maybe for a way that public could access the center of the arcade and the buildings out of that 10-foot area, so they could look at the creek. I never imagined a boardwalk literally with pilings on Fraser Creek. I mean, there are boats a few lots down that pull their boat all the way up there. I've taken my boat all the way to that bridge. But I just see a lot of possible potential that could come out of this property to benefit Stewart residents a lot more.
Do you have any other specifics, Commissioner, maybe that, we could ask the applicant if they'd be willing to include?
Well, I'm under the impression, and the landscape architect said it, without us being flexible on our code, clearly you couldn't preserve those shade trees. But if there was some flexibility in the patio, I think those shade trees, those oaks could be preserved there. That's one of mine, is I have a hard time. We're trying to make something look like it was always there, and we're going to remove some nice, very nice features that I see all the time when I'm out going down Colorado. People, residents, everyone hanging out at that bridge under that shade, enjoying it. But I kind of wanted to hear from some of you guys, maybe not jump to a motion.
If a motion's made, a motion will be made, but.
I mean, I have some concerns. I've stressed my concerns to Mr. Mallers. I also spoke to several of the neighbors and drove by today, and that retention I just can't put my head around that it's already full. It already almost looks like it's holding a lot of water on that property, and now we're gonna put concrete on it. And I just, that's my biggest concern, is just the water retention and the water runoff. And I just feel like it's not, I don't know. I don't think they've done enough to make me feel good about that specific issue, the water runoff and retention.
Well, I'll say that I trust, I guess it's a trust but verify kind of thing, and I'm not an engineer, and I trust Mr. Mathers in his professional opinion that, these newer techniques of pervious concrete and rock exfiltration trenches, I trust that it's doable. I really do, but I understand, the risk being so close to the Fraser Creek. I'm a little less worried about it spilling over. I trust the professionals in the room that they've designed this adequately. For me, the bigger issue is just, we have a plan, a vision for Colorado. And I think, this is one of these cases where we're getting really stuck into the details here, which is important. But overall, the holistic view of Colorado is that shops are fronting Colorado. It's part of the design plan. And so I understand the desire to want to get that patio up along the right of way, because that's in keeping with the overall long-term vision for Colorado. And I expect that in the next several years, we'll continue to grow Colorado down towards the intersection of US 1 and see that design laid out. This is a different property though. I mean, it being up against the creek, I understand that we could make a case to say that this doesn't necessarily have to be up against Colorado because of that railing there. There's a reason, there's an argument to be made that it could be recessed and go in a little bit, but it certainly would break with the overall design aesthetic that we've been pushing for Colorado. But I do hear the landscape architects and the engineers' comments that they're going to have to bring in a lot of fill to put this building there. They're raising the elevation, so unless that fill can be pushed significantly back, and there's I think the project would have to be just fundamentally changed. In my limited understanding, I can't even imagine how, even if they set the building in 100 feet, that level of fill, and then probably the water that would want to drain off of that, it would probably swamp those live oaks because they are below the grade of the sidewalk. So it's complicated, but I guess I'll just say I'm on the whole a little less concerned about the technology here and storing water. I trust that we'll be able to do it. I think for me, the main question is, how committed are we to this overall vision plan for Colorado? We seem to not stick with it.
Mr. Mayor, on that point, I agree. I mean, and that's where my mind comes. If we're going to deviate from the plan, I'm either let's deviate and highlight the features that are there. I mean, if we go back to Live Oak, on the creek side, there's a stem wall, and there's landscape that's being preserved very close to the building. And I just have a hard time with it, that this isn't going to flood anywhere. We're going to have appropriate runoff, but it would flood the trees that are right there, or that, if you didn't rearrange the patio, there's no possible way to keep them. And that's a clear benefit to the residents. But then I go back to what our predecessors did on 2 stories. And if that was our plan, if this is a unique property, we deviate because it's proximity to the creek and try to highlight some of the creek, or stick to the plan and maybe there should be 2 stories. What was the reasoning for 2 stories was, I think, I don't know, I didn't do it, but to increase a downtown walkable feel with residents living above. And, you know, that could be done. I asked one of our planners about that, and he said, oh yeah, that could be done. I said, well, what about parking and stuff like that? I said, well, you know, if we wanted to fit to code, you adjust the size of the building so it matches the 2-story requirement, but you have less ground footprint, which would maybe solve a lot of the hesitation on the water flow issues. You know, I
hear that, Commissioner, but I will argue that if we are to preserve the live oaks, which I'm not against, I would love to preserve them, but if we are to preserve them and push the building facade back in order to do that, we're already breaking from the idea was the 2 stories fronting with zero frontage on the right of way. If we're pushing it back and the trees are remaining, it'll obscure the 2nd story, and I think that we're going away from that. But I understand the idea that it would reduce the footprint overall of the building.
As it is now, though, we're being asked as a commission to deviate and remove benefit to Stewart residents. And that's my problem from it, is that I think there could be a lot of improvement on this project.
I'd like to see the back of their building when they build it. I still would like to see, if we are going to deviate, I still believe you can do a boardwalk if it's right up to the mangroves, just from Colorado, as it wades this way. Forget about going across Colorado, but I would like to see that where people are walking more in our district, the Arts District, and more. I have a hard time with this one too. Deviating away from it, so.
I make a motion to table.
If you make a motion to table,
the
it
applicant
won't come back until you bring it back. So you would table it to a date certain, or
can it be continued with
you can
conditions?
continue, if you continue it to the next meeting, it won't have to be re-advertised. But I don't know if they have more information to provide at the next meeting. I'm not sure what
you just say you're not in favor of it. Nobody's made a motion yet, and then I think we've given staff plenty of comments and the applicant.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable providing an entire list right here. I just, I feel it could be a lot better. I agree with Commissioner Bruner.
I think it would be fair to the applicant. I mean, they've obviously heard us, but I think to be fair to them, I think they could probably use some more direction from us so they know what, you know, what they're.
So how do we all feel as a consensus of the deviation? I am okay with, you know, not trying to push the building right up to the 0 build line in this circumstance, but they have large easement issues and they have the creek. But I'd like to see the creek highlighted, and I would like to see those shade trees kept for Stewart residents.
Is that a motion to approve it with those conditions, Mr. Commissioner?
Oh, we'd have to hear from the applicant if they're amenable to those. All right, I like where Commissioner Glass-Layton was going. Just, I think, for staff and for the applicant, if we can return to the list of deviations, the principal building location, the facade. So that's an issue that it seems like we're all a little concerned about. We'd like to see if it can be pushed in to ideally to preserve those trees. Right now, the proposed site plan has a build-to line of 11.1 feet. This would be to say we would prefer that build-to line to be in excess of 11.1. However far it needs to be to preserve those trees. Do we have any issues with the facade width issue? I didn't hear that.
50 feet, no.
Parking location, to be honest, I would normally fight a little more on parking, but because I do like the idea of this being sort of symmetrical to the other, where the parking is loaded in the front, I'm a little less concerned.
Yeah, it provides logical parking for both areas.
I agree with the parking. I had a wonder that on the amount of seating at the restaurant, and I compared that in my mind to the discussion we had over Roasted Records with the parking issue and how little parking spaces the new Roasted Record had. Again, we all passed that 5-0, and we do want a walkable downtown where, you know, we are open to ease parking requirements. But I wondered at this point, has the seating capacity of the restaurant been contemplated for the parking? Guess that would be a question for staff, Mr. Mayor or Mr. Freeman.
When we looked at this building, staff looked at the site plan, we evaluated what was, staff evaluated the site plan. We looked at the number of seats that were on the site plan. I don't remember what the number of seats were. Can we pull the site plan actually?
Yours or theirs? Yours or theirs?
Well, mine. It's going to be almost impossible to see the text on that. Top left.
It zooms in pretty well.
Yeah.
I can read it out here per, this is Mr. Mather's plan. Building permit, building parking calculations, office 1 per 350 equals 14 spaces. Retail 1 per 300 equals 15 spaces. Restaurant 94 seats, 1 per 4 seats is 24 spaces for a total required parking spaces of 53 and total spaces provided of 62. So 94 seats was contemplated as this restaurant size.
Is that 84 or 94?
94?
Answers my question. Up with the parking.
All right, let's return to the deviations just to tie a bow on it. Height. I agree with Commissioner Matheson about the idea of it just being conforming only visually to the height idea, 2 stories or 26 feet. For me, if it's going to be 2 stories, it might as well be 2 stories. Otherwise, this is needless. It's just going to add to the construction cost, especially if it's going to be pushed back. There's no reason for it, and it's going to add to the construction cost. How does everybody feel about the height and the stories? Sounds like okay. And then were there any issues with the architectural requirements, the balconies versus the covered patio? No. Okay. Well, so we don't have a motion, and
I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner, yes?
I would like to make a motion for them to come back in 2 weeks. And I would like to see how they can incorporate a boardwalk, saving the trees. And I'm okay with going right up to the property, but I won't go there. Bring it back, what is it, 11 and a half? Is that what?
11.1, build 2.
Save the oak trees somehow and have a little boardwalk around the building up to the front building. Somehow, some way. I'd like to see that. I'm not an architect or a builder. I stick men but I'd like to see something like that, where it brings the people walking in downtown and through the sidewalks and all that. I think there's an opportunity here for them that they can really make that piece of property look fabulous
I would second.
and draw people.
Okay. Mary?
So as I hear this, this is
Yeah.
simply a motion to continue to date certain for 2 weeks
June 8th.
or till June 8th?
With a series of conditions, with series of additional
Well,
requests.
Yes, if,
I mean, you guys have been giving advice the entire meeting.
Right,
If
but
the, if the condition is they can't come back unless they meet all of those, then we need to be more specific.
Commissioner Bruner was specific. She said.
The boardwalk, they're not coming back.
okay.
If it's conditioned on a boardwalk, we're gonna need to get the riparian rights surveyed and signed by all the people on the creek. We're gonna need to get DEP approval, and we're gonna need to get permission to cut down the mangroves. So there's no way that's happening in 2 weeks.
No, I wouldn't want to cut down any mangroves.
From when, I think Mr. Mortel and Commissioner Bruner, I have different interpretations of a boardwalk. What I envision when Commissioner Bruner mentions it is that public Stewart residents, whatever, might have access from near the bridge to walk down along the first building, between the first building and the creek, and then access the arcade, so that if there's retail shops there, they could access those retail shops while enjoying a walk between the bridge and along the creek for a little bit, to deviate from walking on the sidewalk
Listen,
in
I'm not-
Colorado.
I just wanted to know if Commissioner Bruner's motion was contingent upon the list, or was simply a motion for continuance for them to come back and try to make changes to appease the commission. I suspect they're gonna schedule meetings.
Right.
I mean, I think they'll figure that out. This is,
Perhaps it would be beneficial if it says, if we say public access and not necessarily a boardwalk.
Yeah, the word might have scared a few people, or all of us. So whatever wording you want to put in there with a walkway.
And so are you clear on the motion, Ms. Kendall?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a motion by Commissioner Bruner and a second by Commissioner Matheson to have this brought back with conditions. Is there any public comment?
That's to a date certain, June 8th?
The commissioner's motion was to a date certain. Should you like to keep?
2 weeks, yeah.
They may not be
Well, I could
able
ask
to-
them if they would like more time. Or I only have 2 weeks.
We can, you don't have to continue it to a date certain at all upon, they can come back to us when they're ready. Which is what I
Well,
would
that sounds,
recommend.
that's okay then. 2 weeks might not be enough. I want to work with them. Thank you, Mrs. Brown.
Yeah, I hear everything you're saying. As far as the boardwalk goes, public access.
I beg your pardon, we'll have to turn the mic on here real quick.
I'm sorry, it is a little confusing. We do have public access from the sidewalk all along the front of the building. We have the sidewalk, an 8-foot sidewalk along the front of the building that goes back to the breezeway, but to the rear of the building here. We did put the patio area so that it's overlooking Fraser Creek. You can see the creek from inside. I understand that's not public access. You're actually going into the restaurant to access it. But in order to create public access from the bridge to the creek, you'd have to create a whole nother sidewalk along the front of the building or something. And yeah, like you said, you can't really put a boardwalk along there. So I guess as far as public access to the creek, I'm a little confused about what specifically you might be looking for, quite honestly.
I guess the borderline, just a borderline, that berm, or what do you call it, that you're gonna take out and fill?
Yeah.
The berm. I need to go over there. I apologize, but I wanted it to, since that's your property, I wanted it to just have a walkway more. Follow out.
Right, where,
ends.
I guess where would it go is what I'm at, because you can't access the sidewalk from there. You've
They
got
would
a
have to-
bridge.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes, it'd have to do it in.
Right. So yeah, the sidewalk we accessed on the other side of the bridge. As soon as it comes back to the building, we access the sidewalk. For ADA accessibility, you have to do that. The other thing is, I was actually going to see if you guys wanted to talk to our architect. He is on the phone. He might be able to explain to you the amount of fill we're bringing in order to bring this to ADA access, because we have to get to the sidewalk with our sidewalk. And then it actually, because of the elevation drop for the drainage, we have a lot going on here that he might be able to address for you. And it actually does, kind of impact those trees, because same thing, if you want to keep the trees, you're not going to have ADA access to the sidewalk, which you have to have. I don't know if there's any way around that. But if you guys want to hear from him, I might be able to have him explain that a little bit.
Yes, ma'am, I would. He might have some, after listening to us, he might have some better ideas.
Steve wasn't sworn. I mean, you could take it for comment for what it's worth. It doesn't matter. It's up to it's the will of the commission. If you hear from him and don't consider it, like, for example, if he says it's a foot of fill and it really is 19 inches of fill and he wasn't sworn, if it really doesn't matter whether it was 19 inches or 17 inches, I don't know that
I think we're talking in broadscapes at this point. But to Mrs. Brown's point, I understand what she's saying. Right now, when you imagine walking down Colorado and you're on the west side and you're going over the bridge, the railing is there, and then it's, the creek is way below you, and then it slowly banks up. And so to create a walkway coming off of the existing sidewalk, they'd have to bring in, either create a boardwalk on pilings or bring in fill on that side and then let it slip back down to maintain the trees and then back up again. But perhaps the architect could.
Thank you, Mike.
Ms. Kewen, you're unmuted, Ms. Kewen.
Okay. Thank you for listening to us. In order to have the boardwalk or any kind of walkway that would be behind the building or along the rear elevation of the building, we would have to modify the bridge structure to gain access. That there is suspended on that bridge structure is water piping and communication piping that I'm assuming that the city has agreements for easements and access. We are also confronted with utility easements within our site because of the lift station. So we cannot move the building any further towards the other building because we're fighting that easement access that you're requiring. There's also some other easement access that the city is requesting on our property to remove sewage from the housing development behind us. So they're asking that they can have an easement to go through our property. But in order to access any kind of boardwalk or any kind of walkway, where would you want that walkway to go? Just in a circle through our property?
No, thank you, sir, for what you had to say. I understand more, so I'm just going to pull mine. Pull it. I don't want to go for any amendment or any motion. Yeah, I want to pull it.
With that being said, Commissioner Matheson has a motion to table that has not been withdrawn or seconded. It's still on the floor.
Oh, I just assumed it died for lack of second.
If you want to address it as that, then we can move on to this. We can keep a record.
I'm not convinced that I think we've made our point clear. I think we can just say that nobody made the motion to approve this, and
procedurally, if there's not 3 affirmative votes in favor of or against, it has the ability to continue coming back until 3 votes vote no. So it essentially, by no action, is a continuance.
But this does bring up a good point, I think, for not only the benefit of the applicant, but I think for staff who might be a little surprised, and for me, I think for us all, maybe we need to address a broader kind of plan for some sort of access or public right-of-way or walkway along the creek. I think that's a great idea, but I don't like us hashing it out right now with this development plan. So maybe we need to kind of work out that idea first, and then.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think there's been some good direction given. I would just like to play devil's advocate that if I was to go back to the drawing board, I'm not an architect or anything, But I do hear what Commissioner Bruner is saying. And, you know, you've got a restaurant, you've got retail. I just wonder if there would not be a way that you could make a boardwalk, as you said, on pilings from the access that they're proposing with a slow ramp down around behind the building to the arcade there, where public could have that access. So they could go and, you know, off the sidewalk, slowly slope down to meet ADA requirements as a boardwalk, you know, on their way to the arcade to visit some of the retail shops. Perhaps the retail shops might have, you know, more frontage along the creek in that aspect. You know, I just, again, we've given direction. I think that sometimes the sky's the limit on some of these things when you just start considering different options.
Okay, well, in that case, and then to respect everybody's time, I thank the applicant and staff for the presentation, and we will.
Mr. Mayor, I know we don't have a motion, it's just tied, but we do have a public comment. If you want to entertain it, it's up to you.
Okay, I suppose we'll take it. Is it Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
Hello, Tracy Barnes, 617 Southwest Channel Avenue, along with my sister Jennifer at 649 Southwest Channel Avenue. Not going to be redundant. I want to thank the commissioners for bringing up all of the points that I made at the CRB meeting. I want to thank profusely Mr. Mathers and his daughter Holly for meeting with us and explaining the drainage situation. That is our biggest concern, like Kelly was saying, how you could possibly fill, you know, put fill in this property and have it do for our neighborhood what it has done with a 12,000 square foot building on it. It did fill full during Francis. The owners of the property that have another small lake on the other side of the parking lot have been seen draining into that's property. And as Mr. Mathers said, you know, it would take hurricane water, and that's the issue. You know, if it filled during Francis, the three that spared us, Matthew, Irma, and Dorian, were much worse. And that creek rises and has come over our seawall and all the way up to our the back of our screen room. We always are concerned with traffic. Traffic reports always say no issues, no issues. But now we have 603 South Federal with possibly 19 or more units going in. And, you know, all those cars are going to come through here. And so that's a little much to wrap your head around also. We want to make sure the mangroves are protected. And, you know, obviously you're not going to be able to do anything that you can't do legally. I would say, as to the boardwalk, you might want to visit the property and look behind there. That is not room, like Mr. Mortel said. It's not conducive, I don't believe, to that. And we would not be for that at all. Lastly, thank you to Kelly and good luck. Thank you for your service and good luck in the future endeavor. And that's it. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. And we have a comment by Mr. Armand Pasquale.
Pasquale, downtown Stewart. I frequently travel up and down Colorado. Right now, it's a nightmare to try to get through there. And as at certain times of the day, you can't get through there. Putting in another restaurant bar is going to just add to the traffic problems. You continually put these places in there, but you do nothing to alleviate this problem. It's getting worse, worse, worse. If you're going to allow this to go in there, then do something about alleviating the traffic problem. I have to drive it to go north and south. Other people have to drive it to come into the city, leave, or go elsewhere, such as the hospital. it's getting worse and worse. When it was a 4-lane road, it was fine. When people restricted it to a 2-lane, it's a disaster. It looks nice, but it does not function. More restaurants, more traffic, more problems. You got enough of them in there now. When all of these restaurants are having activities, getting in and out of there is impossible. Do something about it before you bring in more trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Pasquale. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, authorization to hire Eisenstein Malinchuk LLP. Mr. Mortel.
This is an interesting matter. It's related to the PFOA lawsuit that's been published. This law firm has 8 lawyers in Washington, D.C. The attorney contacted me. All they do is represent municipalities in claims against older insurance companies. What he would like to do is have us authorize him to represent us for a 35% fee, the contingency fee. He knows that we're self-insured for certain years, and any years we're self-insured, obviously we're not going to sue ourselves for. He wants to review the 70s, 80s, and early 90s to see if there's insurance policies that provided coverage. And by the way, this law firm, this is all they do. So I didn't believe him at first either. And he said, absolutely, these older policies didn't have time restraints on them. He said, sometimes it's a long shot because the insurance company still has to be in business. Your policy has to have the language. And then you have to demonstrate that the pollutant material was being used during that time frame. But he also said that when you have a $30 million claim, if you find a $1 million policy, it's generally tendered if they can prove there's coverage for it, and it goes pretty smoothly. So what he wants is to enter into a contract with us, let him look at the old policies, and then if he finds coverage, I'll come back to you, and you guys could authorize him to do that, and of course he would get paid a fee on it.
35%.
Yes.
Is that industry standard to your knowledge?
You know, industry standard for a contingency fee is like 33 1/3%.
Okay.
But I've never even heard of this subject matter. So it's a pretty, niche market to say the least.
And it wouldn't cost us anything unless he's able to recover
No charge
funds.
whatsoever. Right.
Do we have any questions or a motion?
I'll move approval of Resolution 63, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Glass-Leighton and a second by Vice Mayor Clark. Is there any public comment? Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Matheson?
Yes.
Commissioner Glass-Leighton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bruner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Meyer?
Yes, motion carries unanimously.
May I apologize, but may I go back to the last item? Last I understood it was withdrawn. Commissioner Bruner's motion was withdrawn. Was it moved to the 8th? Was there an approval?
There was no motion.
No
No
motion,
motion
so we
was
just
made.
moved on.
We moved on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall. Moving on to item number 9, Tico Gas Franchise Agreement. Mr. Mortel, would you read the ordinance into the record?
Yes, that would be ordinance number 2441-2020, an ordinance granting to Peoples Gas System, a division of Tampa Electric Company, its successors and assigns a non-exclusive natural gas franchise agreement to use the public rights of way of the city of Stuart, Martin County, Florida, and prescribing the terms and conditions under which said franchise may be exercised, providing for severability, providing for an effective date, and for other purposes. I believe Mr. Peters is present.
Sorry, I don't have a microphone. Mr. Peters is here. You have questions for him.
Are there any questions for Mr. Peters regarding the Tico Gas Franchise Agreement?
I have none.
For a motion.
Mr. Peters, in your discussions, is there any chance you could shed some light on the future of where these lines might go?
No, I can't. And I can tell you that Tico, through the Florida Public Service Commission, does an evaluation. So if you were to call and ask for a gas line, okay. Wow. I can get really loud. Anyway, if you were to call, they do an economic evaluation of that. And then based on that scenario, they could do it or they couldn't. But a representative from TICO is here if you want that further explanation. But generally speaking, they go where customers ask them to go if it's economically feasible.
Okay, so if there's something, I've had a few customers or residents ask me about gas lines to their house. And my answer should be that at the moment they should contact TICO.
Contact TICO directly. And there's an evaluation they go through to see if it's economically feasible. And they're in the business of selling gas, so if it is, they'll be there.
Thank you.
If there's no other discussion, I'll move approval.
Second.
I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Glass-Layton and a second by Commissioner Matheson. I will just say that I have cooked with gas before and it is a joy, but and no offense to Tampa Electric Company, but we, I think, need to explore other energy sources. And so I can't be in favor of this, but that has nothing to do with Tampa Electric Company and their services that we provide. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none.
Mayor, can I ask our city attorney a question?
Please.
I mean, Mr. Mortel, do we have any other options at this point to shop the field, so to say?
I'm not aware of any other gas franchises around the state or area, especially any willing to put lines in a small municipality like our own. I know that the local gas company that was here sold to Peoples, which is Tampa Electric, as the mayor points out. The issue for you today is this is a franchise agreement that TICO requires. What would happen if we denied the franchise agreement is they would simply not pay us any percentage at all on the commissioned rate of any of the gas that was sold within our geographic boundaries, but they also would not be allowed to expand it either. But for what's in place now, it expires May 18th. Obviously we're pretty tight here on the expiration date. They're not going to hold us to it for 5 days or days. And even if we rolled it for a month, it probably wouldn't matter. But if we denied them, you can rest assured there's no contract for them to pay us anything.
And if they were denied, would they still be able to operate?
Well,
where their existing lines are?
They still have the existing lines. So we could, if we told them to take out their lines, or we somehow decided we're going to take their lines from them,
like with a
we'd
tow
probably
truck.
be tied up in litigation for 3 or 4 years while we talked about that. But they would operate during that time and collect their revenues. But at the end of the day, historically the utilities, and it's even like Martin County Sewer, once the lines are in, they're entitled to that service area regardless. They just can't expand the service area. So they've got service area and they're using our right of way, as most of it's underground in our right of way. So that's how it starts. And then as Mr. Peters will tell you, and Mr. Bugley, we spent a significant amount of time going back and forth. The city manager was in several of the meetings as well, trying to get more benefits and more clarifications, and like you talked about, a GIS layer so we could see where it was trending and any of that stuff. And the problem is they rely on the state of Florida's regulatory agency and hide behind that when it comes time for when we ask for anything. And that's how it works.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I know that Mr. Peters can tell you that it's kind of how it goes.
Okay. So seeing no public comment, Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Matheson?
Yes.
Commissioner Glass-Layton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bruner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark?
Yes.
And Mayor Meyer?
No. Motion carries 4-1 with the mayor in opposition. Moving on to item number 10, minor amendment to Avonlea PUD. This is a quasi judicial matter. Mr. Mortel, will you read the ordinance into the record?
And this is ordinance 2438-2020, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Stuart, Florida, approving a minor amendment to the new Avonlea Planned Unit Development PUD thereby amending Exhibit 11 of the new Avonlea PUD entitled the Offsite Infrastructure Plan by HJA Design Studio, amending the condition number 25 accordingly, providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Do the commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose? Commissioner Glass-Layton?
I do not, and I'm here with an open mind.
I've done since the last time I spoke where they came in. I'm here with an open mind.
I have spoken with staff, and I am here with an open mind.
I will be abstaining. I have spoken with staff and I've filled out Form 8B.
I've spoken to no one, and I'm here with an open mind.
Mr. Mortel, will you swear in any giving testimony?
Let the record reflect that there are 3 people going to give testimony. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Let the record reflect all 3 testified affirmatively, and if you could please state your name when testifying. And
I do.
online, there's Mr. Waka. Raise your right hand again, just so I can verify it.
I do.
Thank you. Okay, all in.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Stephen Mayer for the record. The item before you is the minor amendment to the new Avonlea PUD, which is specifically to replace or modernize exhibit number 11, which is entitled the Offsite Infrastructure Plan. It was at that time designed by or made by HJ Design Studio. At this point, it's been updated by the applicant, which is New Avonlea. It is also amending condition 25 accordingly. This is an item that I had referred to earlier at the joint CRA meeting. That is something that was adjoined with the RETA agreement, the update of the RETA agreement. So the applicant requested to amend the offsite infrastructure plan, which was originally adopted by the New Avonlea PUD. And there was a request to remove the sidewalk connection and a mid-block crossing on the south side of Baker Road, and all that being east of parcel 12 between that and Green River Parkway. There was also some minor changes that were added, including a crosswalk along Green River Parkway, 2 of them actually, and added pages that include street furniture and other features. So this was with the original plan. You saw that earlier today, and it had phases on it. It also had the streetscape. This is the proposed plan, and just to show you where that the sidewalk is being removed, it's right there. And the applicant can speak to the reasons why that sidewalk is being removed. We also had, you can see down on the bottom that this is showing the update of what the signage and art would propose to look like. There's some removal of conceptual art that was located here that is actually pushed back to this page. So you can see that the conceptual is there. So as these become less conceptualized and more actual, they would be located, in that area. That's what that area would be for. So let's go to the text change is really just to change the number of sheets and remove the date. And so staff and CRB recommends approval of 24/38/2020 on first reading. The applicant is here. Nick, did you want to speak? Yeah. Nick would speak about the removal of the sidewalk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's Frank Waka there. Yeah, if we could just go back to the proposed. Yeah. Perfect. So as Steve had mentioned, there's the bulk of this is removing a sidewalk along the south side of Baker Road. As you can kind of tell from this illustration, the road is offset to the south side of this right-of-way, which puts it right up against this wetland area here. So the grade change between the road and the wetland is steep, and there's not enough room to really properly fit a sidewalk in there. There is a sidewalk on the north side that has about 20 feet on either side of the sidewalk, It is an 8-foot sidewalk. Once we hit our property here, we do provide, sidewalk connection through the property. So the elimination of the sidewalk does not compromise the connectivity of Western Baker Road through the entire project. In addition, the couple of additions that we've added, parcel 12 is, as I mentioned earlier, in for permitting, and that has an observation deck, kind of an area in this corner of the property that looks out over this wetland. It was actually part of the very first offsite improvement plan, but it was proposed in this location in the original concept, which is not permitted by South Florida Water Management District because this area is all under conservation easement. And that's something that kind of, hits tripwires with developments like this, where you have an South Florida Water Management or Army Corps of Engineers. Their rules can oftentimes contradict with visions for places. So, that's just something to be mindful of, not just in this project, but with other projects. So the way our site laid out, we were able to bring that observation deck back in kind of a open spot of our project here. So that's been added back in. And then staff also wanted to see a crosswalk at this location here. So that has been added. This also identifies where gateway features are proposed to be located. And, that's these yellow markers. And one of the things that I want to make clear and go on the record for is that these are concepts, and with final site plan, those concepts will be memorialized. So our gateway feature is is part of our site plan here that's in for permit. I believe Tim has one over here, and these various other parcels will have theirs, where they fit into their site plan. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
Thank you, Mr. Schroth. Are there any questions for Mr. Schroth regarding the?
I move for approval. Let me see the number. 24, thank you, 2438-2020 Avenue property.
Okay, I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Bruner and a second by Vice Mayor Clark. Any further discussion on the board or public comment? See none in person. Do we have anybody who's raised their hand online, Mr. Dias?
Anyone wants to comment online on Zoom, please raise your hand now. No, sir.
Okay, Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Matheson?
I abstain.
My microphone wasn't on. Commissioner Matheson?
I abstain.
Commissioner Glass-Leighton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bruner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Meyer?
Yes, motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Matheson abstaining. Thank you, staff. Thank you. Moving on to item number 11, Stuart Ocean RPUD. This is a first reading, and it is also a quasi-judicial item. Mr. Mortel.
This is ordinance number 2435-2020, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Stuart, Florida, to approve a rezoning from R3 multifamily office to residential planned unit development, RPUD, on the city's official zoning map for an 11.04 acre parcel owned by Saragway Group Investments LLC, located on the south side of Southeast Ocean Boulevard between the Point Assisted Living Facility and Kingswood Condo Association, said land being more fully described in Exhibit A attached, establishing Stuart Ocean Townhomes RPUD consisting of 80 attached homes, approving a master site plan, providing for development conditions and a timetable for development, declaring the plan to be consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, providing directions to the city clerk, providing for repeal of all ordinances in conflict, providing for severability, providing for an effective date, and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Do the commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose?
I've met with staff, I've met with the developer's attorneys, and I've met with residents. And I am here with an open mind.
I've met with staff and the developer, and I think the developer's attorney some time ago. I'm here with an open mind.
I have met with staff, I've met with the applicant, and I have met with residents and neighbors, and I am here with an open mind.
I've met with neighboring residents, staff, and the applicant. And I always have an open mind.
I'm here with an open mind. I haven't met with anyone the last couple of weeks since last time.
Mr. Mortel, would you please swear in all those giving testimony?
If all those giving testimony, could you please stand and raise your right hand? And for those on Skype, or not Skype, Zoom, can we put a screen up so I can see if any of them are true? I don't know if there's anybody on Zoom. Is there? Does the applicant know if they have anybody on Zoom going to testify? I mean, you can
Yeah,
see it's
wow.
Got half the town in here as it is. How can you have anybody in Zoom? Let the record reflect there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people testifying. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect everyone has testified affirmatively. And if you could please state your name, and we're gonna have to limit testimony to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. I think that's a record.
Yeah. That may be the most we've ever sworn in at once.
Mr. Reeds?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Tom Reed, Senior Planner for the record. I'll try and be quick because I know we have the applicant to give their presentation and as well as Zoom comments. This is a rezoning to RPUD with master site plan consisting of 80 attached townhome units. The applicant has noticed with letters to the neighbors within 300 feet of the property, as well as posting 6 signs that have been reposted with updated information, including for tonight's meeting. So on May 21st, just last Thursday, the LPA recommended approval 4-1 for the Stewart Ocean RPUD project, and they asked the developer to address the following. They wanted the developer to correct the front elevation rendering to match what was shown on the plan. They wanted the developer to address the fence on the west side of the property, stripe traffic calming crosswalks, and correct the applicant's narrative on pages 53 and 56. Since then, the applicant has submitted a revised front elevation. It shows grass, sidewalks. They've updated a survey that includes the location of the existing fence on the west side of the property. And we found that that was actually permitted by the Point Assisted Living Facility. They've also revised project narrative, clarifying parking spaces and garages that are counted towards the required parking for the project. And they've also, well, striping was always a part of their plan. So we know that the site is nestled in between the existing Kingswood community, the Point ALF to the west, that's Southeast Ocean on the eastern limits of the city. The site's approximately 11.4 acres. It's currently zoned, or actually the land use is multifamily that will support the townhomes. And the existing zoning is R3 multifamily office. We're proposing to change that to RPUD. So the site is basically made up of 14 buildings. I mentioned they're 2-story townhomes. There's a lake that the developer is creating to the south. It's going to have a footpath around the perimeter. There's preserve, enhanced preserve. We have a good buffer, 80 foot in some places between the existing Kingswood community and the proposed development. We've got, they've got rain gardens throughout. There is a non-contiguous piece, actually 2. This one we're counting as offsite preserve at a 2-to-1 ratio. There's also another non-contiguous piece that's not part of the RPD. However, it's owned by Pulte, and there's existing parking that Kingswood uses that they're going to let them continue to use. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Kevin Freeman, Development Director, to talk about comp plan provisions.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Chair, I'll just take you through an analysis that staff undertook on the comprehensive plan. We looked at a number of policies that relate to residential development and the City of Stewart. Policy A5.1 we reviewed and considered the proposed project is compact in form by being clustered in order to protect and provide upland and preservation areas while providing a low density development of approximately 7.25 units per acre. Policy A5.2, in order to consider the compatibility of a proposal, we need to assess whether the existing residential and commercial development adjacent to the proposed development are able to exist together without problems or conflict. The proposed development proposes an entirely residential development. The proposed buffers and preserve areas within the site provide sufficient distance and visual shielding to protect the surrounding existing residential development. The two-story height of the proposed development is adequately shielded from view. In respect of traffic impacts and safety, the applicant's traffic study addressed volume and safety impacts in that respect. Overall, this proposal is considered to be compatible with the adjacent uses. Policy A5.3. The proposed project is of lower density, 7.25 units per acre, than the adjacent residential uses of Kingswood condominiums. I think that's just under 15, but it's around 15 units per acre. The existing and proposed open space and preserve areas provide substantial area to provide transition zones between the existing higher density and the lower density proposal. Policy A5.5, the development forms part of an inventory that widens housing options for existing and new residents of the city. That inventory, taken as a citywide resource, needs to have a variety of home types and sizes to accommodate families of all sizes and stages of life. This proposal incorporates homes that will contribute to the housing options within the city. Policy A5.6. The proposal complies with the height limitation and incorporates substantial landscaping fronting the streetscape. The proposed development incorporates landscape buffers to the adjacent multifamily residential uses. Objective B1. The proposal is considered to be a good example of a compact urban form of residential infill, as this particular site is primarily surrounded by established two-story residential condominium development, and the property has remained vacant for a number of years. Objective B3, the proposal is considered to be a good use of vacant land and within the community characteristics of the city, and avoids the inappropriate or wasteful use of land and encourages the efficient use of land, resources, and facilities. Policy B3.2, the proposed development by reason of proposed use, density, and buffers is considered to be compatible and complementary to surrounding activities. I'll hand back to Tom Reitz.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Reitz?
Yeah, just to finish up, I want to just go over a couple, 3 conditions. Number 15, and we clarified this, easements were originally dedicated to the City of Stewart. We've corrected that to be dedicated to Martin County. In condition 16, the developers shown proof that in fact Kingswood has given them easement over the entry. That was a point of controversy at some point during the review process. And then finally on condition 29, the developer is to form an HOA, and as long as we have someone or they point a name of contact, our city attorney is good with this condition also. So with that, staff recommends approval of ordinance 2435-2020 at first reading. The applicant's agent, Michael Houston, is here to give a presentation also.
Thank you, Mr. Reitz. Mr. Houston?
Good evening. For the record, Bob Rains. I'm an attorney with the Gunster Law Firm, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. And so before Mr. Houston comes up, I'd like to just make a few comments. Very proud to be here tonight presenting this project. I've been doing projects here in the city for over 23 years now. And I think this is really a very good project that's coming into the city. I think it's a win-win-win And I say that because I think it's a win for the city. This is a vacant piece of property that's been, had a couple of runs at it in the past. Nothing's really come to fruition. It really has been sitting dormant, and there's always something that should have been happening with this piece of property. And I think this will be a good project for the city, both from bringing the type of housing in, some that offers a different type of housing, and also bringing some revenue and generating taxes. I think it's also a win for Pulte because it is a great piece of property, and I think they're going to have a very successful project here. I think they've done their homework, and I think it will be a good project for Pulte within the city. And I think it's going to be a win for Kingswood also. You know, I know there are probably a few residents that would like to see that remain vacant, and I certainly understand and appreciate that. But if something's going to happen on this piece of property, and something is going to happen on it at some point in time, I think Pulte has come in and done a really outstanding job of trying to communicate with the POAs there. We've had numerous meetings, and Michael touched on that a little bit. And also they're coming in here, and I think they're putting a product in and a project in that fits within the existing community. And Mike will talk a little bit more about the densities and all of that. So I think this is an opportunity for everybody to have a good project that the city can be proud of. I think Tom covered some of the conditions that we met. We have addressed all of those, I believe. I would like to say that there is one thing that we do need to do before the next reading, and I've sent it to Mr. Reeds, is correct the legal parcels A and parcel Bs that he mentioned were on the legal descriptions for the draft ordinance, and they're actually not part of the project. So I have sent him the correct legal this morning, and if that's something that we can address between now and the second reading.
Yeah, we can stipulate that.
But I just wanted to make sure that that
And
was.
I was copied on that as well.
Yes.
Lots of numbers.
So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Houston to come up, make a presentation. But before I do, Mike, I would like to submit for the record his resume to show his qualifications and have him speak a little bit to his qualifications. So if I
I'll
could
hand that to
submit
the clerk after he's finished speaking on it.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Raines. Thank you, Mr. Houston. And
Good evening.
Your
Good
resume and reputation precede you, so.
Good evening, Mr.
But we
Mayor.
appreciate
Yeah, I saw
the-
our project up there. That was good. And members of the commission, thank you very much for having us tonight. Your staff was able to get us on this agenda. We have been waiting in the wings for a while, and we are glad to be here this evening. Did you say I should hand it to you now?
Well, you said you wanted to regale us with all of the. So
I'm just going to hand it to you
I'll
now.
give it to the clerk. Yeah.
I'm glad Bob said 23 years because I'm longer than that and older than that. But he absolutely is right. This has been a really quite a remarkable process and project. And I first want to thank you and your staff. I think Kev Freeman and Tom Reitz and Michael Mortel did a yeoman's job of helping us work through this. And we're going to just kind of walk through it with you very quickly. But here this evening with me is our client, Amay Carlson. Amay is with the Pulte Partnership Group. She has been a great client who has worked with the association. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, diligently. Todd Troxel with my office has been the project manager. Bill Pfeiffer with Bowman Consulting and his group. I think, like we said, a pretty great turnout. Juan Ortega is our traffic engineer, and Jerry Rennick, who is our environmental, are all here this evening. So let me go through this, and if we can, we'll just kind of walk through. There we go. There's probably not a better example, and this came up at the LPA meeting. One of the members of the LPA said, "Have you ever seen one like this?" to Bob and I. And the answer was no, we haven't. A very unusual piece of property, and it's got a very unusual history. And as Tom said, it nestles in, but the nestling also has a variety of wrinkles. And I'm sure you've heard about those wrinkles from our neighbors, who are going to be our real neighbors very shortly, as well as from us in our presentations. But you can see how unusual the site is. What's great about the site is its proximity to the beach, its proximity to the river, its proximity to great shopping, its proximity to the library, its proximity to great transportation. This is really a good site. and it's going to be a great addition to the city. So the parcels that make up this are unusual. The main parcel, which is here, is 11.04 acres, is the parcel that's off of East Ocean, and there's an easement road that runs through it. You've driven to the site, you drive through that to get to the back, to Kingswood Condominium 3. And then there's parcel B, which is in the southwest corner, southeast corner, and parcel A, which is in the southwest corner. Thank you. Why those are there and why they're separated, not anybody can really tell. But they are not part of the application except for with the tree preservation issue that we'll touch on in just a second. This also shows you the arrangement of Kingswood, which in itself is unusual. Kingswood 1 is along the east. There used to be an access on East Ocean to that was removed when the new bridge got built. Kingswood Condo 2 is to the west of them. And then in the southwest corner is Kingswood Condo 3. It's right here. What is that?
It's a microphone.
Oh, it's a microphone. Okay. The existing entrances are off of East Ocean, and then there's an entrance off of Kingswood Terrace. And Kingswood Terrace has been part of the discussion, particularly with Kingswood Condo 3, that will come up in just a few minutes. As Tom said, the existing zoning, the R3, and our proposal tonight is PUD, RPUD. The reason we chose a PUD was for the flexibility of laying out the townhouse project, which allows a different kind of roadway alignment than you would see with the apartments or with single family. And then the land use.
So I beg your pardon, Mr. Would you go back to the land use map real quick?
Absolutely.
Okay. So right now, parcels, what is it, A and B that are not part, that you're claiming some preserve credits. We'll talk about this later, but I just right now they're still zoned, or the future land use is still multifamily residential for the one that will be claiming preserve credits.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So those would not be PUDs.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification. So the proposed site plan is presented here. And some of the key features that I think are important is, first off, the roadway that comes through the site remains generally where it was proposed, where it exists today. The entrance into Kingswood community would now have a slight adjustment as we look at the alignment of our entrance road, but in general is pretty much in the same location. You can see the buildings that Tom walked through. Those are all on either the entrance road or on short access drives. The southerly portion of the property is a proposed lake. Today, there are no lakes on the site. The stormwater was an important part of the design, and Bill will be able to respond if you have any questions on that. But essentially, that drainage of the site, once it's treated, will come down to this lake, which also ends up becoming an amenity feature for the community as well. And we'll show you that in just a minute. Along the eastern side of the property are trees and preserves. Those exist today. We're augmenting those with about 50 additional trees, a mix of natives that Todd can talk about if you'd like to get into details. And then as you proceed further down, you can see around the lake is a substantial area of uplands. Those exist today, and they're adjacent to Kingswood's preserve area, which is just to the south, which would be right in here. So that lake creates a very interesting feature for the entire community. $14 total buildings, 10 6-unit, 2 7, 1 4, and 1 2. So we have a variety of buildings. The dry retention areas are these little spaces here and here and here. Those are going to be designed to fit in with the concept of the IFAS stormwater treatment concepts that you adopted, I think, 2 months ago now. And those deal with water quality beyond the standards that are required for South Florida water management. And that is a whole idea of a water treatment train to create better water quality. The enhanced preserve area, we talked about 60 native trees along the eastern side, which is an average of 50 feet, but it varies back and forth. And enhanced perimeter landscaping buffers, and we'll touch on that in just a second. So this kind of gives you a little detail of the southern portion. The lake will also have a 9,000 square foot upland and littoral shelf that probably would end up being in spots like these corners here, and it helps create more habitat both for the birds and wildlife as well as for the fish. The lake is slightly less than an acre, and we think the shape and the feature is attractive as well. So there's an existing trail that is right here in the community right now, and plus or minus, essentially, it's a way to walk from Kingswood 2 over to their pool, and also just transfer, kind of cruising around in the preserve areas. There's probably just some dog walking and things like that. So what's happening here is we're picking that trail up, we're preserving it, and we're picking it up and actually creating a loop trail. It'll go around the entire lake, come back to that, connect over to the 4-story units along the eastern part of the property, allow them to be able to access it as well.
Mr. Houston, what will the community trail, is it mulch? Is it?
Yeah, today
pavers?
it's sand, shell, mulch. It's probably more pine straw, just because there's enough pines in there. So it would not be paved. Yeah, this is definitely a nature trail, but it'd be a great place for you to take your dog. But we're not proposing it as a paved asphalt trail.
And it'll be 4 feet, it says. And it'll be maintained in your PAMP, I suppose, as part of your PAMP, or?
We hadn't talked about that, but that's probably makes sense because its location will be part of the PAMP. So when we put it in, nothing will be removed other than maybe some very small ground material. So yeah, that's probably a very good idea that it would be in the PAMP. We hadn't got to that level yet, and we are showing that is that 6 feet, Todd?
4 foot.
Oh, 4 foot. Yeah, 6 would seem excessive. 4. So this little detail too just kind of begins to give you a little sense of how this connection occurs right here. So the loop that exists today comes down to here and then enters into Kingswood 3, and there's a little connection here that enters into Kingswood 2, and this little parking lot exists, but you can see that it's on our property because that's our property line. So a variety of things are on between the two properties, and that's been part of working with the HOAs to resolve. This area here is also where a mail kiosk will be. This is proposed to be part of kind of the flow into the community. It has perpendicular parking spaces. These are spaces here for Kingswood 2's pool area, which is this pool, and these would be added, but you can see we're kind of interfacing those all together. And we have adequate parking for people to pull in, get their mail. But a lot of people, this is so close, a lot of people will also walk, we think. The 2-story townhomes, what we wanted to show you on here is, first off, we'll be doing a variety of colors. We haven't submitted all those colors, but they will be beyond 2 and probably end up being 3 or 4 or 5. The key feature here for us is just that these are 2-car garage units on the ends, and then one in the center. That relates to our parking, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. The end units are 1,637 square feet. The interior unit's 1,367. So you can see the size is not that different, but the layout and the arrangement are. We'll be proposing a new sign. There's an existing sign now across the street, which is the existing community sign for all the condos. This will be on the west side of the entrance here. Oops, sorry about that. Right in this location. And you can see here, this is generally going to be the arrival. This is the detail of the preserve area and treatment along East Ocean Boulevard. proposed seating area, this came up in our February LPA meeting where there was a discussion about bus service and access to buses. And as you know, Marty doesn't come through here now. There isn't service. I hope there will be soon heading out to the island. School bus will not come into the community, so the school bus would also be picking up out here. But what we proposed is a shaded seating area and a bus waiting area here right next to the entrance. And it's not covered, but it is shaded by the palms that are part of our entrance feature. And I think it'll be a great little spot to sit. The school capacity analysis came back from the school board with 17 students total, 12 students that would go to JD and to Stuart Middle, 5 that would go to Jensen Beach High School. And their numbers are based on townhouse projects across the county. This is the enhanced landscaping that we're providing at the entrance. So that side of the entrance, I think, will be attractive as you come into the community. And that's a 22-foot width. And then some of the plant material that's being proposed, including royal palms, sables as our native, and then those are date palms along with foxtail palms. Crepe myrtles. Parking was a substantial discussion, and so we put this together. The required parking for the 80 units is 160 spaces. We provided 203. We've shown that by going through this graphic. These are all the 2 garage units. And those 2 garage units, we only counted 1 interior and then the 2 in the driveway. This is the detail of how that works. And these garages have enough room for the recycling and the trash bin. Just check 27 units with 4-car capacity. And then the interior units, 1-car garages, we did count 1 car and 1 car in the driveway. The detail is shown here. And then on-street parking, 16 spaces. We added 5 spaces from the original plan that was submitted and the LPA's comments. So these parallel spaces, and then the spaces that I just showed you over at the mail kiosk area, those are perpendicular. So 203 spaces total. So we exceed the number of required spaces by that. And this is really just kind of a detail about how that 2-car parking works. 43 additional spaces. The open space calculation was part of the discussion as well. And, you know, do we have as much open space as Kingswood? And so we did an analysis that showed the building coverage is 17, the pavement is 26%. The lake, even though it seems like open space, is not calculated, is 0.93. And total impervious is 42%. The open space was 48%, and you can see it here in the green. The required open space for a non-PUD is 30%, or 3.3 acres. Our total was 48% for 5.3 acres, which is 18% additional 2 acres of additional open space provided. Density was a discussion, and it always is. Subject property is 11 acres. The current zoning at 10 units the acre would allow 110 units. At the maximum of PUDs in the city, you could do up to 330 units. Our proposed is 7.25 units, or 80 units. Existing Kingswood, I think Mr. Freeman mentioned this, if not Tom, is 31 acres. And has 447 units at a density of 14.36 acres. So if we total 447 units, our 80 units get added to the existing Kingswood, that's 527 total units now. Our project is 15% of the total. Parking and where people park and how they don't park in Kingswood spaces was discussed at length. And so we talked about the documents that everyone has to follow in a community. We have a professional management company, and in this case, it's GRS Property Management. They will be the ones responsible for keeping those rules enforced. HOA manager will be responsible during the land development construction. May Carlson and her team will have someone as a Pulte representative, will be a point person for both the city as well as the neighbors. Those are the docs, DCCRs, prohibition against utilizing amenities. So it will be saying, don't be using the Kingswood pools. Requirements for decals, guest parking separate decals. Question on how that will work exactly, but we'll be working through that with staff. Statement regarding parking space and adhering to the parking requirements. And prior to turnover, all association vendors will have insurance and all the correct licenses. So one of the areas that was a discussion was at the end of the drive access aisles, and these turnarounds will have a no parking. These are not designed for parking. These are designed for emergency garbage and for fire. So the existing encroachments, we just wanted to show you briefly, and you can see that the yellow shows the existing encroachments to remain, and the red is existing encroachments to be removed, and we'll touch on that in just a second. But one of the main ones is removed, or maybe the only one actually, is the existing asphalt road that follows this location where our lake is. And so that access would be removed. The other points of encroachment, this drive into condo 2, this connection down into 3, and then some other ones up here. These connections, these are encroachments for the parking on Kingswood's condo 2, that building, the parking and the drive for this one, the access here to these two, the connection here is an encroachment to these buildings. Those all will remain and be institutionalized, or probably not the right word, memorialized with the PUD agreement. And community meetings, like nothing you've ever seen before. 2 meetings in the summer, 1 meeting in January with all 3 associations. May Carlson did all these meetings. 3 meetings in February after our LPA meeting, and then 4 meetings in May. And these have been all productive, constructive, positive meetings. And Kingswood, and I think Bob mentioned this at the LPA meeting, have been great all through this. This has been, everyone's been constructive and very positive. So in summary, this is a challenging infill property. And as Bob said, one that we worked very hard to establish a good plan for the city, for the neighbors, and for Pulte. The connections through the property being maintained and respect for the neighbors is being followed. The density is relatively low compared to the existing density or what would be allowed. The open space actually is exceeding quite a bit the open space. The native vegetation areas are actually exceeding the 25% minimum. Stormwater innovation is going to be a key part of the project, and again, one of the reasons that Bowman Engineering has been working on the details. The lake trail we think is a great addition to the community, and the existing trail will be preserved. Enhancement to the preserve areas along the east property. So Bob probably has a couple of closing comments, and we thank you very much for your time, and particularly for allowing us to move the project to the next level.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. Mr. Raines?
Yes, just summarizing, that does conclude our presentation, but just a couple of closing points. Again, this I think is an excellent example of a perfect infill project for the city. You know, we've taken care to make sure that we're compatible with the existing community, you know, with the low density, and working through and solving some of the encroachment issues that they have. And again, your staff, I think, has given us a recommendation of approval, and Kev went through all of the requirements of the comprehensive plan that we're consistent with. We got a recommendation of approval from your LPA. You know, we believe we've demonstrated that we meet all the rules and requirements, but more importantly, I just think it's a great project and one worthy of approval. So therefore, we would respectfully request that you approve this project as presented. And we'll be glad to answer any questions.
And just as a point of clarification, commissioners as well, Kingswood 1, 2, and 3 were done without the benefit of a PUD. And as a result, those parcels that are kind of tangents or whatever, at one point or another, there was a single landowner, but there was nothing restricting those parcels from being transferred and sold, which led us to where we are. The advantage of putting this into PUD now, instead of just doing straight zoning for that western setback that they needed, is that it will now put restrictions on those parcels, and it will also preserve this dispute, or now going forward, lack of dispute as it relates to the use of those parking spaces and those right-of-ways. It'll be documented in the city, so someone couldn't literally sell the land out from the others or something like that. So that will be a benefit to the community for us to be able to track it better.
Thank you, Mr. Martell. That was my main point of clarification. So I was under the impression, due to your original comment, that you wanted to revise it with reference to parcels A and B that are being contemplated as part of the open space, or the upland, I should say. But it was said in this report that they were not part of this PUD, but they are. That was the correction?
Well, no, they're actually not part of the project and the legal description. So they are not part of the project. But I think, to Mr. Mortell's point, they basically we're putting a preserve on one of them.
They're conditions of the PUD.
Right.
They're off-site. So the project itself's density doesn't take those into consideration because they're not contiguous.
Right.
If you added those, the density would be even lower.
Right.
But the project would be in default if those were used for anything other than what these conditions are saying they're being used for, one being preserve, or the other one is, I know one's offsite preserve, and I'm not sure what the.
Well, the other one is, there's nothing.
But they're allowing them to have parking.
But there's parking on there right now. Yeah, so
I'm not a lawyer, both of you are much more.
But I did want to clarify.
It's strange.
But so I just want to be clear, because I'm hearing the PUD is conditioned on the maintenance of those parcels, but they are not part of the PUD.
I don't think there's
between first and second, we can make sure that's very clear
I'd like to
that
make
they're
sure
not
that's
going to
very
change.
clear.
Right. Okay.
And usually, especially since it's not contiguous, I guess it's parcel B, the one that's being used for an upland preserve. I don't know if it's worth it bringing back up, but I'd like to see potentially that they're rezoned in preservation at the portion that's being used for the upland preservation. Or some other easement that could be recorded, or you know.
Well, maybe we can talk about.
We can address that.
Between the second.
Okay.
Because I don't want to try to do that I don't want to do that kind of stuff on the fly
I
right
understand.
now.
And we also don't want it to cause a problem for Kingswood.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, so we can,
Okay.
we can look at that.
I hear exactly what you're saying, I believe, on that, Mayor. I mean, that parcel would be in the PAMP. And it would be maintained by the HOA, is that correct?
Yeah, it is in the PAM. I'm being told it isn't.
Yeah, no, I think we haven't, have we started a PAM? I don't think we started a PAM, so it will be, just like the discussion on the trail.
Right.
We would add that to the PAM. I think that's an excellent idea.
And it would be preserved land.
Yeah.
In continuity. I don't know who would address this, but I was just wondering if the seating area for the kids that'll be waiting on the bus has a bike rack.
It does now.
Thank you.
Go get him, Commissioner. Commissioner Bruner.
I just want to say I'm happy with this project. I live off Beach Boulevard, and we haven't seen anything nice in decades. And everything's 55 and over.
Commissioner, I beg your pardon, will you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
I'll be so glad when I don't have to wear this anymore. But anyway, what I was saying, I'm glad for this project. We haven't had anything nice like this in years, decades. And mostly when I was young growing up, everything was 55 and older. So I think it'd be nice to see some children in the neighborhood and going to the beach. Whoever lives there's got a lucky place because you just like that to the beach. Thank you.
If there's no other discussion, I'll move approval of ordinance number 2435, 2020.
I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Glass-Layton and a second by Vice Mayor Clark. I did have one more question, maybe an engineering question, Mr. Houston. If you could point me in the right direction. The pond, or the lake rather, in the preserve area to the southeast corner, are we draining any of the stormwater to that with culverts, or is that just being maintained there?
Bill Pfeiffer with
Good evening, Bill Pfeiffer, Bowman Consulting, engineer of record. That is going to serve as stormwater retention. It's being piped. So runoff's being collected throughout the roadways and the rain gardens, and then ultimately served to the lake for storage.
Thank you. Okay, we do have some public comment that has already filled out green cards. If anybody is here that would like to provide public comment on this item, please fill out a green card if you have not already done so.
If you're attending by Zoom, please press participants and click raise your hand now. If you're on a telephone, please press *9 if you wish to give public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Dias. We'll begin with our folks here present in the chambers. First is Vicki Leach. She's gone. Next will be Jane Cornett. Hi, Ms. Cornett. Thank you. And if you just state your name and address for the record, please, when you begin your comment.
Thank you. My name is Jane Cornett. I am an attorney practicing here in Martin County, and I have the pleasure of representing Kingswood Condominium Association number 3. And I'm very happy to report that I've been asked by my clients to appear tonight to speak in support of this ordinance. We did have a lot of discussions, as Mr. Houston pointed out, with the developer, and we were able to reach what we feel is a very fair and equitable agreement. We have an extensive letter of intent. Obviously, we can't finalize anything till they actually become, everything's done and done. But we think we've worked out something, that addresses the concerns of the members of our community and also serves the needs of Pulte. And I want to assure you all that part of that agreement is that my clients have an option to purchase those out parcels for the princely sum of $10. So we will be able to, if our owners approve, because we have to have a vote of the membership in a condominium, but if they approve, we will become the owners of those parcels. And my folks are not going to allow anything unusual to happen to those parcels. They would become part of the condominium common elements. So we've actually planned for that, and Pulte has agreed to give us that option. So we think we have a very fair deal with them. We've worked out the easements, we've worked out the encroachments, and we request that the commission approve. If there's questions, of course, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Cornett.
If not, I'll go away.
Thank you. I have a question for the applicant now. That's a little, so going back to our brief discussion around the out parcels.
Right.
So if they are to be sold, I just want to be sure that there's some continuity of.
We'll still deed restrict them.
Okay.
So the buyer will be buying on notice of that.
Right.
But I'll have to address with Bob some of those questions, because my other concern is, what if they don't buy them now? Like, I want to make sure that this has not just a maybe.
Right, and in our letter of understanding too, we do say to them that they're sold upon the ability through the city's approval to be able to sell those.
I don't think anybody's trying to do anything untoward. I just want to make sure that this is.
But what I'm saying is, if there was any kind of unity title or anything like that, you know, if it was little lot split or whatever. So it's contingent upon us being able to convey that.
I'd like to have that really tied up before second reading. Thank you, sir. Next, we have Jack Raynaud.
My name is Jack Raynaud, and I am the brand new president of Kingswood Phase 3.
Congratulations, sir. Thank you.
We had a meeting on the 20th of May, and at the meeting, the board decided that we would accept Pulte's proposed development. We're no longer in any opposition to it. We have asked our attorney to withdraw her request to be an intervener. Part of that agreement was our purchasing of parcel A, parcel C, and a little bit of B. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you again. Is there anybody else here who would like to give comment that's present? Thank you. I have Laura Joby.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and remotely. And I'd like to thank the developers, Pulte, and all of their staff. My name is Laura Joby. I live at 2950 Southeast Ocean Boulevard in Kingswood 2. I just wanted to make it part of the record that I understand our board is also working with the Pulte Group in some items of intent going forward. And from what I understand, most of the community is certainly in favor of this. And I want to thank Pulte for being certainly a good neighbor.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no other comment here in person. Is there any online, sir?
See none online.
Before I call the vote, I would just like to say this is nice that we have seen a developer work very closely with the neighboring residents. It seemed an insurmountable task, and so it's not only kudos and good job to the developer, but also thank you to the neighbors for being willing to work with a project, an infill project like this, being such an odd shape. Wow. What a great item to, to go out on for you, Commissioner. Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please? Call the vote.
Commissioner Glass Layton.
Yes.
Commissioner Matheson.
Yes.
Commissioner Bruner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark. Yes. Mayor Meyer.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Okay, moving on to our ordinance second reading, our final item for the night on the agenda. Item number 12, amendment to the City Code of Ordinances relating to building regulations. Mr. Mortel, would you read the ordinance into the record, please?
This is ordinance number 2440-2020, an ordinance of the City of Stuart, Florida, amending the existing Chapter 10 of the City of Stuart Code of Ordinances entitled Buildings and Building Regulations to align with state code, to enable enforcement of contractor licensing, and to establish safety provisions for storm shutters, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for an effective date, and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Mr. Nicolosi?
Steve Nicolosi, building official for the record. Nothing has changed since the first reading. I don't know if you have any questions.
I move for approval then.
Second. I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Bruner and a second by Commissioner Matheson. Is there any discussion, any public comment on this item? Sorry, Mr. Nicolosi, it sounds like
I see none online, sir.
Thank you very
we're
much.
ready to rumble.
Appreciate it.
Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bruner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Glass Layton.
For the final time, yes.
Commissioner Matheson.
Yes.
And Mayor Meyer.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. And with that, we adjourn at 9:03.
Just for Commissioner Glass. Yes.